evolution of the profession. Our values are transparency, integrity, consumer protection, inclusiveness, excellence, and accountability. So that is what we aspire to be. I also wanted to say specifically that we wanted to thank very much the Wright Institute for again having us or hosting us here for having our meeting. It's a wonderful location, a wonderful facility for it, and we're very appreciative of the generosity of the institution in allowing us the use of this room and this building. So thank you very much. Dr. Newman, who is president of the Wright Institute, I believe?
I'm actually the
Dean of the Wright Institute, I'm sorry.
bad enough.
The Dean of the Wright Institute has joined us today for at least part of the proceedings. I was also asked by the technical folks to remind board members that it's very important that you turn your microphone on when you want to speak, and when you are done speaking, to please make sure to turn your microphone off. Otherwise, it will be creating interference relative to the audio process. The other thing I wanted to mention is, as you can see right now, there's 5 board members sitting here. And as of, I think, our last board meeting, we had 9 board members sitting here. Some board members had their terms come naturally to an end, and one of our board members, unfortunately, recently, Johanna Arias Bhatia, because of work conflicts, determined ultimately that she would no longer be able to serve on the board. And I know we in particular are really going to miss her involvement in the board, as well as the other board members that departed. She really spearheaded a lot of the work that we did around applied behavior analysis, and was an important voice on the Board of Psychology. So it was a loss to hear that she wouldn't be able to continue with us. We will be having a new board member join us, and that is Ms. Alita Bernal, who is from Los Angeles. She was appointed by the President Pro Tem of the Senate. She's a managing partner of Urban Point LLC, a marketing and business development company, but she previously worked for a variety of medical institutions, including Marina Del Rey Hospital. She was a community relations director at St. Vincent Medical Center, and is a board member of the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center Foundation and Camp Ronald McDonald. I have had the opportunity to speak to Ms. Bernal, and she's very excited to be able to join the board. Unfortunately, her appointment came so late in the game that she was not able to rearrange her schedule. So since we only have 5 people sitting here, if any board member were to stand up for any reason and leave the room, we would lose our quorum and would not be able to conduct business. So here's the deal. I promise to have lots of breaks. If you promise not to leave, and if you really need a break, just, knock me on the side of the head. It always works. Okay. Yeah. So I think those were all the things that I wanted to mention to you relative to what's going on. And with that in mind, we come to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the public comment for items not on the agenda. I read this every time, but I think it is useful for us to remember that the board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. So in other words, no matter what the public comment is, there will not be a substantive response from the board. Is there anyone that would like to make a public comment?
So my name's, boy, all these are different. Excuse me. I had served in office for 8 years. And we had a certain mic set up, so every time I've gone to a place, they've been different. Any case, my name's Victor Rajakian. Though I serve on local, regional, state, and one federal committee, I'm here speaking on behalf of myself. Tomorrow, I think the licensing committee will bring a proposal forward dealing with training around suicide for the folks that you certify. Some of you probably remember that I and others spearheaded a piece of legislation a couple of years ago under AB 2198, which was to require more training in the areas of suicide assessment, treatment, and management. I won't be able to be here tomorrow, and that's why I'm speaking in public comments today. Tomorrow I'm involved with a project that's funded by the Center for Disease Control around looking at suicide prevention. Frankly, or interestingly, that's a research project to direct people to their primary care provider and see the primary care providers have more training in suicide assessment, treatment, and management. So I want to encourage you tomorrow and going forward to try and put the requirements in place that you discussed, two of you at least, they're here, discussed at your committee meeting. We think that this training is invaluable in terms of preventing suicide in the state of California. I'll remind you that at least 10 other states have passed similar legislation, and there's a boatload full of states considering it at this stage. I tried to get an update the other day, but because I've been traveling, I hadn't heard a response back yet, but I'll be happy to pass on to the executive director whatever we hear. And then I want to make sure that I issue this reminder. I think at some stage, in part of the dialogue we've had over the last couple of years about this legislation, people have felt like, well, maybe we're blaming psychologists or other clinicians. That's far from being the case. I mean, if we use that logic, I hate to say this, I've picked on law enforcement, where we've gotten legislation passed last year to increase training. We've done work with college professors. We've done work at the public school level, and I'll stop. I won't go through all the rest, but we're not picking on anybody. What we're trying to do is create a fabric in which everybody has some level of awareness, and in particular, the clinicians have a certain level of training because that's who we're referring people to. I'm doing something, including that project tomorrow, which, well, not tomorrow, it's because it's primary care providers, but in a number of cases, we're doing projects where we refer people to clinicians. And so we're just trying to create a system in which all the pieces and parts work together. The end goal is to reduce the number of deaths in California in terms of suicides, which probably you understand have been increasing, including the last 4 years have been the 4 highest years in consecutive order. So I'll end this by saying what I've said. As I said at a press conference the other day with a project we were working on, my personal goal hasn't ever changed since I started working on suicide prevention 11 years ago. My goal is just simply to save lives, not to single out individuals, but to see if we can save lives. So thank you for your time.
And thank you for your comments, Mr. Ojaki. We appreciate your continued interest in the subject.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda, unless there is other public comment, any further public comment? Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 4, which is the meetings, the minutes of May 19th through 20th. And I wanted to see if board members had particular comments that they would like to have addressed. I know that I had a few comments that I wanted to make, and I'm referring to page 2 of the minutes, lines 57 to 58, which said Dr. Phillips reminded him, that being, I guess, Dr. Gary Schumer, that the board could not hear information regarding specific cases. What I would like to do is add in its role as an adjudicatory body, so that makes it clear why we were unable to invite him to speak to a specific case that he was involved in.
Could I ask, while we're on that paragraph, line 56, is the word summited used in a specific way?
Or was that intended to be submitted?
Probably submitted.
I didn't come up with that language, but I'm not sure.
Submitted.
Submitted, okay.
Excuse me for.
Oh, not at all. I missed that. And I was being really anal about this particular one. Also in the same page, on lines 74 through 76, there's a discussion about the bigger deficit. If a particular piece of legislation had passed, it says that Ms. Sork said if the board did not receive its general loan fund repayment, it would need to borrow from its reserves. I think was really the intent, if I understood Ms. Sork's comments at the times. So I think rather than pull from, it should be borrow from the reserves for the startup loan. The intention here is that obviously the money is used for startup and then is reimbursed out of licensing fees. This has kind of become a moot issue because that legislation is currently out in the legislative universe somewhere. Let's see if I had any more comments that I wanted to mention. On page 9, lines 380 through 383, Ms. Sork said that staff is going to schedule a meeting with Dr. Phillips, Ms. Jones, and Assemblymember Garcia to discuss pursuing legislation to clarify reporting requirements under CANRA. The opinion from the Attorney General's office is still pending due to litigation. I think that was an accurate statement at the time that it was made. So it's probably not in need of being amended. That situation has changed. Actually, they have canceled that opinion from their calendar.
But Dr. Phillips, this would be the recording of the
Right.
video.
I realize it, as I said.
Yeah.
Thank you. On page 11, lines 452, 453. Actually, I think I was giving an explanation rather than asking a question. So I believe it should say Dr. Phillips explained why, as opposed to ask why. So much of the disciplinary process goes on without board member involvement. And again, address the question of the board as an adjudicatory body. I can repeat that if that'd be helpful.
Yes.
Dr. Phillips explained why so much of the disciplinary board process goes on without board member involvement, and again spoke to the board's position as an adjudicatory body. And I think that's the remainder of the comments I had on those minutes. Is there anyone else that has additional comments that they would like to make? Michael?
I was going to suggest that when we list others present, we try to include their advanced degree, particularly if they're a psychologist. And we do that in some places and don't in others. And I guess my thought is that I think it's better if we can include it. And for example, on page 1, lines 38, 39, and 40, Melody Schaefer would be either a PsyD or a PhD, as would Elizabeth Winkleman, who's also a JD. I'm not sure about Nakalair. Then we
Dr. Erickson, I have a question about that too.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, is this list being compiled from how people are signing in? And if that's the case, maybe we need to put a note to actually have people.
That's a very good
included.
point, yeah.
'Cause I don't know if people need to figure out what people's degrees are.
Very good point.
I'll add that into the sign-in sheet. That's a great
I think
idea.
that would be hard for you to then figure out everyone, if you're taking the list from who's here.
I don't think I would advise the board to do that. I think, I've actually previously advised the board that I don't even think that others present should be listed in the minutes.
Oh.
Because unless someone, knows that that people have a right to come and comment and identify themselves or not, unless they speak toward an issue and I choose to identify themselves, I think that, I have some issues with listing people who are there. I think in addition, it may elevate people to a certain status that isn't really intended. So I think I would advise against that. But I don't think we need to keep track of what people's degrees are. I think it's a privacy issue and they should not have to. I know they may choose to and they choose not to, but I think there's a difference between having people sign in order to get CE credit or whatever reason, or choosing to identify themselves as they speak to an issue versus we just take the list and transpose it into the minutes.
So could I ask, what are you recommending in terms of, for example, Dr. Jolanda Crow is almost always here. Would we not include her degree from now on?
What I would suggest is that she be identified as she comes up and identifies herself to speaking toward a particular issue,
Mhm.
but that other than the staff people present, I would not identify members of the public who are here.
That seems
In
to
the
make
minutes.
sense, yeah. Well, I have started a discussion on that.
That's my advice to them.
Seems like. So, nothing more on that. I think I found one other suggestion. Not in these minutes, that's all I have.
The only one thing I was going to point out is, and I understand that the minutes track the agenda, but if the board is trying to have a reflection of what happened when, on page 5, starting with agenda item 21, that actually all started on Friday, according to my notes, because we went quite late Thursday night. And then you pick up on page 10, where it says Friday, but everything from, as far as my notes go, from page 5 to page 10 actually was discussed Friday morning. So how you want to do that, I don't know, but I wanted to have a reflection, especially if somebody is trying to look on a webcast to know when something was discussed, that they would have some idea of when it was discussed.
Yeah, maybe as part of the minutes, we could say these next items were taken out of order or whatever due to time constraints or something like that, and that actually reflects what happened and when it happened. And we can still put the agenda item number by it.
Dr. Phillips, based on our council's recommendation, would it be helpful if I suggested or recommended, or you perhaps, that we remove the list of others present other than staff?
I find that initially an appealing idea. I don't know if the board has strong feelings about that one way or the other. Is there anyone that feels that would be a material omission?
I like actually both reasons you said, Ms. Marks. I just have a question. If somebody from the public does come up, identify him or herself, does that go into other people present, or does it just appear in the minutes as you're thinking about it?
My recommendation is that it just appear in the minutes.
Okay.
Make it simple and plain.
Well, and so I guess, I don't know if you're, I just wanna add my comment possibly to, before you take your motion or whatever, to do that strike.
Sure.
It would be part of adopting the minutes, I think. I cannot remember, I read through this again last night, but on page 11, agenda item number 24, so that was before 47 through 462. Ms. Monterrubio, maybe you remember, I know that through your presentation, which was an outstanding presentation, there was a question about something, you were gonna look at something else to break out for us. And I can't remember what it is, and so, I think you were gonna look to see if it was some kind of trend or something, but I just can't remember, so.
Complaints online.
That's what it was, thank you, Ms. Zorick. So can we add that to the minutes, because that was something I wouldn't want us to lose.
What are we adding?
It was complaints received online. Thank you.
So what language specifically are you suggesting that we add on item number 24? Ms. Monterrubio was going to follow up regarding proportion of complaints filed online.
So it would be probably after 461, line 461, or actually 462, given the questions about complaints received online, Ms. Monterrubio will provide that information, something to that regard, because that's kind of what happened.
Will provide information concerning the number
Right,
of
that was the
complaints
request, and I say that I would provide it's actually in the board report for this meeting.
Okay, so maybe take the language straight from the report and put it over there would be good. But that's a part that I couldn't remember what it was, because I know we talked about quite a few things, and,
Sure.
but that was one thing. Thank you.
Any further comments on the minutes? Ms. Zorick?
Really quickly, I was gonna suggest historically, I think the board had listed agenda items as they were listed on the agenda in the minutes. I would prefer actually that, and we give the caveat that things can be taken out of order, that we go ahead and just list the agenda items as they were heard and discussed. So the numbers may not be in order on the minutes, but they were in the order that they were discussed. So I think that might be helpful in line with Ms. Mark's comment as well.
So in other words, if we were to take, just so I understand what you're saying, if we took agenda item 19 before we took agenda item number 15, it would actually show up above item 15 in the minutes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that would also answer the question of making sure that the day that something on the agenda was actually discussed is accurately reflected in the minutes as opposed to when we intended to discuss them.
And I have a comment regarding what Ms. Jones just discussed about the complaints being submitted online. I remember including that in the minutes, and I remember it being somewhere else because I didn't exclude that, and it is under agenda item 11 under the enforcement report, so it's in a separate side of the minutes. But it's line 128 and 129 when Dr. Harlan requested the board receive information on how many complaints were submitted online at the next meeting.
And where was that again?
It's on page 4, lines 128 and 129.
Thank you. And I'm gonna look again, because I feel like it was discussed at that presentation part, so it was just confusing, and I think I would support that, in terms of the minutes being in the order that it's taken. But thank you for pointing that out. Because when I first read through them, I
Yeah.
didn't catch it, and I read through it again, I'm like, I think we discussed something, so we did get it.
So would you like me to put it in the other spot as well, or just keep it how it is?
I guess keep it as it is then, because that would make sense, as long as we have it
Yes.
recorded.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from board members? Would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we accept the minutes as corrected.
Second.
Is there any board discussion of the motion? Dr. Horn?
Will that also include the recommendations that we talked about, because they're not, or would they be amended on this agenda, on these minutes?
You mean the recommendation relative to inclusion of,
Others present, and also listing the items as we talked about them.
I'm uncertain of the intent of the moving party. I would think rather than, I would think it would be helpful to do it on a going forward basis rather than attempting to
Go
do it
back.
with respect to these particular minutes, unless people feel strongly to the contrary.
I think it's an easy strike of the people that are present, given Ms. Mark's comment. I think that could be easily accomplished today, but I think the other, in terms of the order, might require reviewing a videotape. So if we could do half of that, I think would be a good motion to be amended to include just the striking of the others present names.
Are you willing to accept that friendly amendment?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. And Michael?
Bless you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any further board discussion? Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Glass-Steagall, could you please call roll?
Akwe-Badu,
Yes.
Erickson,
Yes.
Horn,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Item number 5 on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the telephonic board meeting or teleconference board meeting, which occurred on July 27, 2016. Are there any specific comments related to those minutes?
On page 2, line number 31, where it indicates that Dr. Phillips said that we would be discussing item number 4N first. I think in this case, we should move 4N to that slot because we did discuss it there. And that's the only recommendation that or proposed amendment I have.
Any other comments?
Couple of very minor ones, perhaps. Line 480, at the end of the line, we might want to strike the word did. And on line 483, we might, right after questions, we might want to strike the word that. And I would, in keeping with our previous discussion, we might want to strike the others present from this set of minutes.
Except as related to the particular comments that they made during the
Yes,
course of
precisely.
the teleconference. That would certainly make sense to me. There was one other comment that I had, which is at line 447. We actually, 446 to 447. He, referring to me, said that the language does not provide specific guidance, but rather general, and I think to make the thought more complete, general considerations. That was my only comment with respect to the minutes. Are there any further comments with respect to this set of minutes from the board? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I so move that we accept the minutes as amended.
Okay. A second? Ms. Akwe-Badu is seconding. Is there any discussion among board members as to this particular motion? Hearing none, are there any comments from the public? Mr. Glass-Steagall, would you be kind enough to call roll?
Quabadu,
Yes.
Erickson,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Dr. Phillips, I'm sorry, if I could just go back to item number 4, I forgot to say this, and the minutes were, I'm not asking to change the minutes in any way, but I know that we closed out the meeting so quickly that what didn't get reflected in the minutes was that the board also presented cards to the departing members. So I just wanted to put that on the record somewhere, so, because I thought that was an important piece, and we were moving to end the meeting, but just again to I guess, emphasize what Dr. Phillips said about the sentiments we have as a board for people that departed.
Very nice idea.
I'm going to ask council the question, do we need to revisit our original motion in order to make that change?
To be the most accurate, yes.
Yeah, so you're
Well-
moving to make that change?
Well, Ms. Marks, because it didn't happen during the meeting, so it would be outside of the meeting. I just felt like I know it was the intention for us to have it as part of the meeting, so it really wouldn't get added to the minutes, but I just felt like to put it on record someplace, it was important to say it here, because it did happen, but it happened after our meeting concluded. So it isn't a change to the minutes, in fact, so I don't know how we do it, but it would be an addition to the minutes in some kind of way, but it didn't happen during our board meeting.
So it'll be reflected in these minutes?
Yes.
Oh,
That's why I was
yeah, there you
stating
go.
it. That's why I was
Oh,
stating it,
okay.
just to make it on the record, so that we have it somewhere that we acknowledged our colleagues.
So it wouldn't be needing to make any change to item number 4, you just want it to be recorded here that at that meeting.
Yes, after that meeting, in fact.
After that meeting, due to my oversight.
That's not what I said in my
No,
statement.
but no, I'm not saying that. But it was due to my oversight, so I'm taking responsibility for it. Ms. Quabadu, will you withdraw your motion? Okay, thank you very much. So we've had a motion. We've had board comment. Is there any public comment? I think the question was no. Oh, did we vote on this already? Oh,
I
okay.
was just making a
Oh, we were,
statement that I wanted
okay.
to get into this meeting.
Sorry, I got myself confused.
I just have a quick question for clarification. I'm not sure if I'm understanding exactly what cards you're referring to. In the minutes, I just said that Dr. Phelps presented certificates of appreciation to Ms. Starr, Dr. Harley, and Dr. Gallardo. What you would like me to expand, I'm not sure.
What I'd like you to write for this meeting, that in addition, after we looked at those minutes,
Uh-huh.
it also was stated that at the conclusion of the board meeting, the entire board presented cards of,
They're talking about the cards that everyone signed.
yes.
Okay.
And that wasn't, because we didn't present it during the meeting.
Right.
But I think it's important that, we acknowledge our colleagues, and so I just wanted to put it on the record for this
Okay.
meeting.
Thank
So
you.
you can put it in this minutes. Thank you.
Moved on, okay. We're then moving on to agenda item number 6, which is the budget report. And that will be delivered by Mr. Glass-Steagall. So, Mr. Glass-Steagall, if you would be kind enough to deliver the report.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Good morning, members of the board. In your agenda item binder under number 6 is the budget report. The Board of Psychology has a budget of $4,962,000 in the governor's budget for fiscal year 2016 and 2017. There is no action requested at this time. This is informational purposes only. Attached in your binders is the budget report from 2015-2016, an explanation of discretionary and non-discretionary budget items, an analysis of our fund condition, and the Board of Psychology balance expenditure comparison spreadsheets.
Are any of the documents, Mr. Glass-Steagall, that we're looking at dependent on loan repayment? Or are they somehow reflected on loan repayment as to prior loans made from our general fund?
No, there are no general, well, the analysis of the fund condition does reflect the loan repayment dollars, but there is no, if I'm understanding correctly, if there is no current plan for us to loan funds.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I misstated. I was wondering about the repayment of the loan fund.
Yes, the repayment is.
That is reflected in these numbers. Have we been given cause for any concern, given recent budgetary talks in Sacramento, as to whether we will actually be receiving our loan repayment, or do you know?
Currently reflected on the spreadsheet of the fund condition, it does show our loan repayment was moved to 2018, 2019.
And originally it was going to be 2017, 2018?
Correct. It was going to be 2017, 2018.
Okay.
But we are in constant talks with the budget office with the Department of Consumer Affairs.
So the loan repayment has been deferred for at least a year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
A question, many times these financial sheets are a little difficult to digest. I wanted to ask a question that may seem a little unusual, but are you aware of anything that we should be concerned about in this particular packet of spreadsheets and numbers, something that warrants a discussion that you've noticed as you put it together?
No, our expenditures are less than our budgeted expenditures at this time. We are at a structural imbalance, meaning we're spending more money than we bring in, but that's been known for quite some time. And with our loan repayment scheduled even in the next 2 to 3 years out, there's no issues at this time with our fund condition, our expenditures. We're in a very healthy place.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions or comments for Mr. Glass-Steagall? Ms. Monterrubio?
Good morning. The enforcement report is item number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall.
You're welcome.
With the enforcement report attaches the overview of enforcement activity, which is page 2, and that displays all of the complaints, investigations, and discipline statistics for the previous 5 fiscal years and the current fiscal year to date. On August 1st, Denise Russell, our special investigator, resigned from the board and accepted a position with the Department of Managed Healthcare. The board has posted the investigator position with Cal HR and anticipates a new hire, hopefully by the end of August, probably early to mid-September. In June of 2016, the Chief of Division of Investigation, David Chris, and Kathleen Nichols, Deputy Chief of Health Quality Investigations Unit, met with board staff to discuss the proposal to allocate cases from HQIU to D of I. Chief Chris and Deputy Chief Nichols explained that HQIU is experiencing staff shortages throughout their field offices, and as a result, board investigations could take up to 24 months to complete. Chief Chris and Deputy Chief Nichols explained that if we were to transfer cases over to IEU, we were looking at 6 to 12 months for case completion. So the board decided to move the transfer cases over to IEU. It's a 1-year pilot program. We're going to see if the transfer of the cases actually work and are completed in 6 to 12 months. We do have the option of going back to HQIU once they are fully staffed. And if I could just have you flip a couple of pages down where it says HQIU update for BOP. This document is informational only. It provides additional information as to the challenges that HQIU has been facing and some possible solutions. So it's there for you to review, and if you have any questions, please let me know. In regards to our complaint program, we've received 83 complaints since July 1st of 2016. Of those complaints, 35 were submitted online. All of our complaints received are open and assigned to an enforcement analyst within 8 days of receipt. Since July 1st of 2016, we've issued 1 enforcement citation. Citation fines are issued for minor violations and do not require formal discipline. There are 16 cases pending at the Office of the Attorney General, and of those 16 cases, one has been sent over since July 1st, and we are currently monitoring 49 probationers. Next, the following document again is the overview of enforcement activity. And there is one other document that I would like to hand out, and that's the spectrum of administrative actions. At our last meeting, I believe Dr. Erickson mentioned this document. We were trying to locate it during that meeting, which we did, but I made copies for everyone. And what this is a list of non-disciplinary and disciplinary outcomes for complaints. Thought it would be useful for all of you to have a copy. It's on our website under the Consumer tab, and then you can click on Disciplinary Actions, and it's second from the top. So I can distribute this as well if there are no further questions or any questions.
So it would be, for instance, the members of the public here, it would be easily accessible to them on the website?
Absolutely. Again, that's the Consumer tab. If you click that on and then go to Disciplinary Actions, it's the second from the top.
Okay, great.
I don't have a question, just have a statement. I just wanted to say I appreciate board staff's, I don't know if interest is the right word I want to say, but the willingness to implement the pilot program to kind of, make the cases, help the cases get completed quicker. So that seems exciting. And so I hope to hear kind of how you and other staff members are impacted in the next board meeting, just to see how it's going before the end of the year. It would just be interesting to hear how that's going along.
Absolutely. In our initial meeting with David Chris and Kathleen Nichols, we did ask for quarterly meetings to make sure everything is working, if we have any questions or concerns, or if they have any questions or concerns. So I think the constant communication is going to be beneficial for both parties. So we're excited. And again, waiting 24 months for cases to be complete it's just not acceptable. And so I appreciate David Chris and Kathleen Nichols coming to our office to try to figure out a new plan. And again, we're excited. It started July 1st. So far, so good. So I'll keep you updated.
And I know that there are other measures you're taking in your discussions with Mr. Tom Play and others regarding how we can further streamline our process so that people are not kind of in limbo for such a long period of time.
Correct.
Could I follow up? Thank you for your report and for distributing the spectrum of discipline and administrative action. I wanted to ask a question, Ms. Monterrubio, on the discipline program where it's mentioned 16 cases are pending at the AG's office and one has come back. Many times I think all of us in different ways wonder why it takes so long for discipline to be adjudicated. Oh. I thought I was going to have to stop talking if you left the room.
You don't want to see the president have a minor anxiety attack.
Thank you, Dr. Horn.
I guess my comment and my question is that in different ways we all wonder why it takes a long time to adjudicate cases, and it looks like, and probably for very understandable reasons, there can be a backlog that builds up at the AG's office that we have little control over. I'm wondering if that is accurate. Like 1 out of 16, does that mean 1 in the month of July and they'll come along regularly, or are we waiting for them to come back so that we can take our next steps?
Well, what that is stating is that we currently have 16 cases pending. We, meaning board staff, has sent one over since July 1st. So what that means is we've sent one over for an accusation or possibly a statement of issues to be filed. I can't really speak to the backlog of the Attorney General's office.
I misunderstood this then. So we've sent one in the month of July.
For filing, correct.
Yeah, and there's already 16 over there.
Correct. And the process is lengthy. I know that we discussed that in detail at the overview presentation in May.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can't really speak to the backlog at the AG's office, but at the board, we submit cases over very quickly to our experts for review, for investigations through IEU. Once the investigation is complete, and again, we're looking at 12 months now on average, it then gets forwarded over to the Attorney General's office for filing of an accusation. Statement of issues are a little bit different in regards to time frame. So what we have to do then is just wait for the AG's office to file that accusation, and that can take anywhere from 30 to possibly 90 days for the accusation to be filed and then served to the respondent. Once it's served, again, now you're looking at possible hearing dates, continuances. There's a lot of things that are involved with that process that don't make it timely, unfortunately. And as all of you know, in our performance measures, the discipline performance measure, which I believe is performance measure number 8, is difficult for many of the boards to reach. That target date is 540. We seem to always be around 900 and above. But again, that's for most boards within the Department of Consumer Affairs, because again, that's outside of our control. But in regards, again, to the board staff, we get cases over very quickly to our experts for review, which we allow 30 to 45 days, and then quickly over to our investigative unit, and we just have to kind of wait for the investigation to be complete.
Great, thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
Very helpful.
And I would like to just acknowledge my thanks, I'm sure the other board members' thanks, to the enforcement staff and to staff in general with regard to their efforts to try to address this ongoing problem. I know many of the factors are outside of the control of staff, but you're trying to, as I can see, change all the variables that we do have impact on.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. We're now going to move on to the Executive Officer's Report, which would be item number 8 on your agenda.
Included in the meeting materials under item 8 is an organizational update as well as a DCA update that was provided by a Deputy Director, Christine Lawley. If there's any questions the board has, I'm happy to entertain those.
For the whole packet, right? Yeah. I just want to say I'm excited that Sharice is on board now, because I know that that is an area that staff has been so helpful in doing a lot of the administrative pieces, and I just want to acknowledge Chris. I know he's doing a lot, so I just want to say I'm excited to work with Sharice, and I'm hopeful that it'll help with that kind of I don't want to say backlog, because it's not a backlog, but that workload distribution a lot easier. So I'm excited that we are moving along, and I know that there are a couple of positions that are out, but just want to acknowledge your good work, Ms. Sork.
Thank you, and I thank you for saying that. I wanted to welcome Ms. Burns to her first meeting here at the Wright Institute, and we look forward to working with her.
And I want to say, I'm sorry, Ms. Burns, not Sharice. That's way too informal.
And for those of you that are not familiar with the position taken, Ms. Burns is now going to be the Central Services Manager for the office, which is a key management position, and we're very excited that she was able to join us.
Yes, unless there's any other questions. Okay.
Okay. For those of you that are watching the clock, we're going to be taking a break about 10 a.m. So that I can be true to my word that I will give breaks frequently and often so we don't lose quorum. Item number 9 is a strategic plan update, which my entire role is to say, Ms. Sorek, would you like to report to us?
Included in the meeting materials is the strategic plan update. This has all of the action items that were updated as of July. You'll notice on the status column that some of the items have been moved. These items have been moved due to statutory and regulatory timelines. For example, the retired status regulations are pending a statutory change first before we can go ahead and move forward with that. So I just wanted to call attention to, if you see items that say move to a different quarter than was reported at the last meeting, those are due to statutory and regulatory barriers.
So if I understand correctly, Ms. Sorick, the items that are moved to subsequent quarters than that we originally anticipated being done with, there are procedural, regulatory, and legal reasons why we cannot yet accomplish them?
Correct.
Okay. But I do want to compliment staff on the enormous number of items that have actually been completed or in the process of being completed. I think many of us were part of the board retreat in which we began to develop this document, and it's been a real pleasure to see it being implemented as opposed to board retreats I might have been on other boards that are unrelated to the state of California.
I would agree with that, and I have a few questions, but I always have questions on this section, I think. So I just have a couple of things. On page 1, in terms of the first section, 1.1, the 5th line down, implementing findings from CPS review that's been moved to this upcoming quarter. What are we focusing on in that area?
This is staffing. They did kind of performance measures where they had our program look at how we processed applications, how we did enforcement. We created desk procedure manuals, looked at all of our processes. And then the other part of the CPS report was recommending changes to our organizational structure. So that was the part that was moved to that quarter. And we have, either put out ads for filling those positions or requesting the budget change proposals to establish those permanently moving forward.
Fantastic.
I did have one question in that regard. The acronym CPS, for the benefit of the public, represents?
That is a very good question, and we discussed this.
What? CPS HR Consulting.
CPS HR Consulting is their full acronym, and I believe we called to ask what the acronym stood for, and they had to call us back. So I think that's what they kind of go by. I think it's California Performance something, but that's totally a guess, and I don't want to put that on the record.
Okay.
Just in case I'm wrong.
Because I know that we get sometimes used to using acronyms, so to the extent that we can be clear in our use of acronyms, I think it's helpful to the people that are involved in the board meeting and who are watching the board meeting.
And I have a few other questions too. On page 4, on the first line, I know as a member of the hardworking, efficient licensing committee, I'm just curious if this is still on Schedule 1, in terms of line 1 on page 4. So I just wanted to ask that question more so as if we are, that's great, but just to ask the question out there as we look at looking at this for next board meeting. So, because I know that we've talked about this notion of a timeline for our work as a licensing committee, and I don't know if we've actually finished doing that, if, kind of best case and worst case scenario, because I know that we've gone beyond that. So I just wanted to add the question to the mix as you look at for planning.
Right now, we have made some changes to 2913 and 2914 of our statute. We also have the verification of experience regulatory package. So we are in process to making some changes to streamline the application process via statutes and regulations. Pathways may go into 2017. And when it gets closer to that timeline, that may be a status change that we would need to move that out. But we'll just kind of keep that on schedule until we know farther after our next licensing committee how much we've completed.
And again, the spirit of my questions really are like just looking at this because we're doing so much activity, and I'm like, wow. And I know that with licensing, there's a lot of moving parts there. So, thank you for that answer. And I have just a few more. 1.8, the whole section about the hand card pocket licenses. Is this going to be achieved in Q1 2017? Is that going to be brought back to the board for any kind of review before that gets implemented? So. That's a question. I see smiles. So, just a question.
Just an update on that. We have submitted and have a contract ready with a vendor to do a hard card pocket license. We're very excited about the prospects of this. This is something Board of Registered Nursing does for its licensees, and it looks very similar to a driver's license. So it's something you can actually put in your wallet and it will stay there, and you won't have to laminate it or fold it or anything like that. So very excited about that. The process by which we would move forward after the contract is in place is we have to go before a change control board with the Department of Consumer Affairs to see if the Breeze system will talk to the vendor and be able to do this. Since Board of Registered Nursing already has this functionality, I'm very hopeful that we'll have positive results at the Change Control Board meeting. But we need to submit the request, and then at the next Change Control Board meeting, we'll be scheduled to present our contract and our idea, and we'll be hopeful of their decision.
I have three more other questions, but I'll let somebody else get in to ask questions. And
Well,
I'll come
I
back.
just wanted to follow up on that, the significance of that to licensees and registrants. Because normally when we present our professional credentials, it looks like your insurance identification card that you cut off of a piece of paper. So it doesn't feel like a very weighty document. So I think it's important that we continue to pursue this change.
Thanks for giving a break, because I just want to say something as we move to, I just want to say something about Goal 3, which is laws and regulations. I haven't really thought about it till we've had such an uptick on really looking at everything that affects psychology coming through and really taking our time to digest it and stuff like that. So I'm just very happy this is on our strategic plan. I'm not even sure if it's ever been on there before. And I want to congratulate our committee that really takes a look at this all the time, and our staff who works with the committee taking a look at this all the time, because I think we really are beginning to have good input, thoughtful input into the legislative process. So just wanted to make that little comment as long as we're going through it.
And I guess on that note, Dr. Horning, because I do have a question about like number 1, 2, and 4 in that section about the professional organizations, consumer groups, and I appreciate the work that we have done in this area, but in terms of soliciting, input from the impacted stakeholders, I think we've done that. But in terms of kind of a more concrete time frame and kind of who is in the pipeline and who are we soliciting, I know this is something that over the years I've been on the board, that's been a question constantly about our list of consumer groups that we're working with. And so I know we keep saying on schedule, but I think we might need to put a more specific time frame around this, because I don't know if, given all the other work that we're doing, I don't want this to just be listed on here and us not do some real concrete work in this regard. So I know that we talked about trying to figure out affinity groups regionally and otherwise based upon different other affinities. I just want to ask the question, kind of how far are we along with the consumer group part of that?
One of the things, one of the first projects we're going to have our student assistant work on is compiling the stakeholder list. It's a project that it is a priority for board staff, certainly, but juggling some of the more pressing priorities, we have, put that a little bit lower on the list until we get the student assistant hired. But that is something that Jason and I have had, or Mr. Glassbeagle and I have had several discussions about. I think it's something that's really important, especially as we're preparing to make law changes, that we send out targeted messages. It's something that's always been on my radar, and something that I think we have been lacking is being able to reach people that are impacted by law changes and things that the board is doing. So it is definitely on our radar, and we have completed our interviews and are pending HR approval for the student assistant. So we're very excited and hopeful for this individual to come in and start that project.
Well, that makes me very excited, and I think that's great work. And so as we look at this plan for the next iteration of the board meeting, I would think that we might want to change it to like Q2 2017 and put some kind of time frame and not just be on schedule out there. And I do know that would require us to have a staff assistant. Is that the title? Staff assistant? Student assistant.
Mm-hmm.
The student assistant, and in terms of their time frame. But that would mean that if they weren't able to do it, then we'd have to shift some other resources around. But I think that this is a priority that has been on here, that would be then something that as a board and as management and leadership, that would be something for you all to kind of consider how we divvy up that work.
I also just wanted to add that this particular type of work is a particular focus of the Outreach and Education Committee, which unfortunately, because of recent departures from the board, has come down to one member, Ms. Akwebudu. But we have now found reinforcements. Dr. Horn has agreed to join the committee as well, and I have an inquiry out to our newest board member, Ms. Burnell, to see if she'd be willing to do it. Particularly given her community relations background, I think she would be a particularly great resource on that committee. So we're hoping that in revitalizing that committee, we'll also be able to make more steps in this direction.
Thank you, and I know that we have those changes, and that excited for you, Ms. Akwebudu. You have more of a committee. My last area is 6.5, that's page 13, about identifying and implementing tools and communication methods to improve the board connection. Mr. Glassbeagle will attest to my kudos for matrices and organization. I just want to say thank you to Ms. Monterrubio. I know we talked about this some time ago, about figuring out a way to update board members about responding to licensing committee activities, and I shared that with Dr. Phillips, so thank you for sharing it with staff, Dr. Phillips. I feel like that has been something that's been really helpful to me, and so I'm glad that he was able to help implement that on our behalf, and I hope other board members have found that useful. But I just want to congratulate staff on that, because that does help me to remind me what's out there. So thank you so much.
And just as a point of information, we will be receiving actually reports on a going forward basis as to what will be due the following week, because the current reports we've been receiving is what is due this week, so that people will have a little bit more lead time to be able to get through the materials in an appropriate fashion. But, we're working out the kinks in the system, but it's great that we got the system in place.
Well, like I say, I know we talked about this about almost 9 months ago, so I know progress happened, so I'm glad to hear that. So seriously, thank you so much. And one last thing, actually, is the page 11, 5.2, in terms of exploring methods to expand visibility of the board. And so I know that I love the way our outreach information's been captured a little bit more, including non-sanctioned things, although I know what non-sanctioned means. I hope other people know what that means as well. But I think that now as we change with our board composition, that we also figure out ways to include the new board members to do certain things. I think that would be a really wonderful way to get involvement as people are coming on to the board. So thank you for accommodating all my thoughts, but I just feel like this is such a great tool, and I really looked at it with really keen eyes, because I know that I had questions because I've been so consumed with licensing committee activities that I think I had forgotten about all of our other priorities. And so thank you so much, Dr. Phillips, for allowing me to take so much time.
And thank you for your close attention to that. I think that was very, very helpful in helping us to clarify the timing of some very important issues. Are there any other comments on this particular report?
I would just like to thank the entire staff. I'm just reflecting on when this strategic plan came about and how you all are, we and staff in particular, are so committed to this document, and you're moving it along. Let me, and I'm sure the entire board feels this way, thank you all for methodically going through this, and just each time you're just constantly wheeling it down and down. So we appreciate you all doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pursuant to my earlier promise, we will now take a 10-minute break.
Chris said it's still very low. So, said he's looking at full volume, he's having trouble hearing. So I don't know which one.
I can hear it perfectly.
I don't know, it's weird.
Just before we go into number 10, which is the communication plan update, I would like to mention we're going to go through in, I think, I'm hoping in relatively short order, items 10 through 15. We're then going to take our lunch break. We will have to be back here at 1 o'clock, but this afternoon is going to be consumed largely by closed session. So there really will be no open session items subsequent to the two petition hearings. Oh, wait a minute, the petition hearings are open. Oh, never mind. So we will be coming back exactly at 1 o'clock for a petition hearing. You're welcome to be here. I need more caffeine. Maybe the Diet Coke's just not doing the trick. And then that will be and then we will be going into closed session at the end of the day. Okay. Pardon my confusion. So item number 10, which is again attributed to me, but I feel like I've done very little work on, is the communication plan update.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Included in your meeting materials is a communications plan update. This is something that is updated for each board meeting. This is something that was laid out as a byproduct of the strategic plan, and it's something that is updated as items are changed throughout the year. If the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Again, just I think we should put a timetable as opposed to as needed about creating the email lists. So that's the 6th line, or the 4th line down.
Thank you, I noted that, and I think that it would be a realistic goal to have that be Q2 2017, so I'll go ahead and note that.
Any other comments? Any public comments on item number 10? Well, then we'll move on to item number 11, which is the social media update.
Included in your meeting materials is agenda item number 11, the social media update. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to explain anything.
Overall, how successful do you think we're being in our use of social media?
I think we're being very successful. We are constantly being retweeted and shared additionally by agency. We are under the Agency of Consumer Services and Business Consumer Services and Housing. So they have their own Twitter and Facebook, and anytime we tweet or share something or post something, they in turn spread it out. So not only are we sharing to our own network, but just the broader, global groups, which is fantastic.
Great. Any other comments or questions on this particular report?
So I have a question. When people are viewing our webcasts, if they view for a portion of the meeting, say, is that counted? So,
While they're live broadcasting the webcast?
or this is what's on our website, right?
Correct. This
So
is our YouTube
anytime
views.
somebody accesses it, it counts. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, thanks. That's all I wanted to. So it may not, this may not reflect number of people.
That's right. There may be individuals that go back into the webcast
Yeah.
and follow up again. We don't have a way to capture the where the user is coming in from. We just have individual hits, and it could be a person doing it 5 or 6 times. So there wouldn't be a way for us to know that. I did want to highlight one thing that has come up in the last couple of months is we have had individuals mention the Board of Psychology on our Twitter account in making complaints or making statements against licensees. And I just want to, again, encourage individuals that do have a complaint against a licensee, that you file that complaint either online, in person, or by paper, so that we can follow up with the formal complaint process. I did tweet the other day, have a complaint, don't tweet it, file it, or something to that effect. So there's not a place like Facebook where we can put a policy about what mechanism we use Twitter for. On Facebook, we do have a policy that says this is not a place to, lodge complaints against a licensee or anything like that. We want to obviously protect consumers, and we also want to afford individuals that are licensees their due process. So just an encouragement to be mindful of our Twitter account is really for announcements of the board, to let consumers know about new and exciting things, and licensees as well.
That's an interesting point, and I don't use Twitter very often, so I'm not very skilled in that. But like in Facebook, you can take down posts. You can't take down tweets, correct?
If the board is mentioned in a tweet, there's nothing we can do about it. And it's really unfair, I think, to a licensed individual if we're mentioned and connecting that to an individual licensee, and there isn't some kind of formal process in place to protect the privacy of the licensee, the consumer, et cetera. It's just not an appropriate mechanism for that.
And beyond I love that, what did you say, don't tweet, report, or whatever that was.
Right.
I like that idea, that little kind of slogan kind of thing. When we do get that kind of tweet, do we respond directly to that handle, is that the right term, to let them know what the policy is?
Because we don't have that policy availability on Twitter,
Got it.
I don't believe we're actually able to tell them that we can't take that under consideration.
It would be a public forum for us to do that publicly on Twitter, and without some kind of contact information like an email or a phone number of the individual. And with Twitter accounts, you just see, whatever the person's handle is, and there's no real personal identifying information on that. So again, that's another reason not to use Twitter for that function, because there's no real way for us to follow through and follow up on that.
So I'm wondering, I know we're going to be talking about this later, social media and stuff, but I'm wondering if a reminder like this can't just happen every time we have a board meeting. Just for anybody who might be listening or even later watch, or just to let that information, as many ways as we can get that information out there, thanks.
I'm wondering even if we could have a regularly scheduled tweet that goes out once a week that simply reminds people that that's not the appropriate forum for making a complaint against the licensee.
We can definitely, regularly tweet that reminder. And I would just like to say that it sounds like a great article for Dr. Horn.
Thinking the same thing.
For the next one.
That's a hard bullet to dodge. Okay. Any more comments?
I don't even know what a tweet is. Let me just say that, so. Somebody's going to help me.
Well, I can help you, Dr. Horn, only in that I think the message is aimed more at consumers rather than at licensees, right? So the board might want to consider how to get that out to the consumers.
And maybe that's a part of that first project with the list that we have to inform and educate folks on processes.
If there are no further comments on that particular topic, we're moving on to the website update, number 12. And again, Mr. Glass-Steagall.
Thank you. Included in your meeting materials under agenda item number 12 is the website update, which shows the top 5 pages and number of views and the actual content of that page for the Board of Psychology's website. And the date range is May 5th to August 2nd. And then there's an attached chart for changes over time, and this is for informational purposes only.
And again, we can't, and perhaps appropriately shouldn't, track if it's the same, if somebody's logging in every day, or if it's individuals that are all, this represents 38,000 individuals. It might represent 7,000 individuals that use our website relatively regularly.
That is correct.
Okay. And I honestly would not be comfortable with trying to track who the users were of the website. It seems to me that's very invasive of people's privacy.
I have a question about, I know that it's obviously not one of the top 5 hits, but the newsletter. I know previously we did a mailing out to folks on the mailing list, because I got this, asking if you wanted to get hard copies or get emails. Do we do that also for the newsletter, and are people interested in getting it in that medium, or, or no one's going to the newsletter link because people get it in the mail?
We do email.
We email the newsletter out to licensees, to our all licensee list, and we also have about 250 copies that we give to staff, and we have the physical stakeholder list that has the association groups and the couple of consumer groups that we have on our stakeholders list, which is a small list currently, but it will grow. Did we send it out to training directors as well?
No, we're still working on compiling the list for
Okay.
that. But we do send it to the agenda mailing list.
That's right.
Okay, so really the majority of the way we get the newsletter out is not hard copy, it is the email copy, so That's good to know. I was just wondering about that.
That is correct.
We print about 250 copies, hard copies, and then the rest of it is electronically sent.
Any other questions or comments on the subject of the website? Any public comment? Then we're going to move on to the update on the newsletter.
So the update on the newsletter included in your meeting materials is the copy of the spring journal. We should have all the content compiled by next week for the summer journal, which should be going out by September 20th, which according to Google is the last day of summer. And I hope Google's right this time. Because it's been wrong.
Any other comments or questions regarding the website from board members or the public on the newsletter? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, well, then we're going to move into outreach activities, item number 14 on the agenda. And as I previously mentioned, there will be, given Ms. Cuevadu's that it's all fallen on her shoulders, there will be additional troops coming in to reinforce her.
Included in the meeting materials is a outreach activities update, agenda item 14. The only items that have been added since the May meeting is Ms. Johnson attended the KPIC Quarterly Board of Directors meeting. She presented on statutes and regulations about supervised professional experience and formal internship placements and formal postdoctoral training programs, which are members of KPIC. And it sounded like there was a good number of people in the audience. They asked very good questions. And we look forward to any kind of opportunities with internship programs, schools, where we can present information to both the applicants and the supervisors. Our hope is that the more opportunities we have to communicate our process, the less problems and issues we will face down the line. So we want to make ourselves as available as possible. We still are held to the travel restrictions based on the executive order. So for those groups that have invited us to attend conferences, we really appreciate the invite to increase the likelihood that we will be able to attend. We really need a speaking role. So any opportunities that you all have to have us come speak about our processes, our enforcement, licensing processes, changes to our laws and regulations, we're happy to come and present that. And we'll put in requests to attend those conferences as they come in. So the last item is ASPBB has their 56th annual meeting in October. The board will be requesting that I attend that meeting, and I have been asked to present the impact of the North Carolina Dental Examiners case on California to, I believe, sit on a panel with other states and talk about if there's any process or statutory regulatory impacts that we've seen since the resolution of that case. So a request will be submitted to DCA for approval for the out-of-state travel, and I will be reporting on the resolution of that request or approval at the November meeting.
I have a question about that request, because I also feel like I don't know how we do the request, but I feel like particularly for that issue, you know, Ms. Marks has also talked about that. Is that appropriate? I don't know if that's Ledge Council. I feel like she's been so involved with that too. I mean, I don't know how that panel is being structured, but it just feels like, I know that she's been a part of that too, so I don't know how we're requesting that and what that looks like.
Can I answer that? You're talking
Sure.
about that last one
Yes.
that Ms. Sark just talked about. So it's going to be one person from each of several jurisdictions that have been asked to speak about it. So, yeah, we just ask Ms. Sark as the executive officer.
I only asked that question because I know there's been so many DCA
Right.
conference calls about it, and, you know, and just in terms of, I know you represent us super well, and I don't want to say that you wouldn't be appropriate for the panel, but I just know that all of the moving parts with it for the state of California, it just seems like, should that be a part of it? Was kind of the question.
So in response to that, I mean, I don't know that this is the appropriate place, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that may be something, because usually when ASPPB asks a jurisdiction to speak, they ask the jurisdiction to speak. And it may be something that, as a board, sometimes we want to say, this is who we'd like to send to speak on that issue. You know, they don't have, that organization doesn't have any, you know, we need that person specifically. And again, this is not, you know, against you at all, and I'm glad we're putting in for you and all that kind of stuff. But if Ms. Sark can attend, particularly the annual meeting, she also gets to attend, because she's the executive officer, a special meeting for all the board executive officers. And that also is a good thing too, just to, you know, kind of hear what's happening elsewhere and help each other out and stuff like that, so.
No, and I agree. I know that this has been a question for the last couple of years, so that we as a board would be there as a sanctioned board outreach kind of activity. I think that, I just feel like that would be the part that I would just, you know, I just wouldn't want any of us, particularly you, Ms. Sork, to be out there, because I just know there's so many moving parts of what the state of California is doing. And so if we're speaking on behalf of the state of California is doing the Board of Psychology in California, it's different layers. The other thing too, and I think I kind of alluded to it in the comments earlier, like I know what non-sanctioned means, and I feel like given this is kind of a document that's going out to other people, I don't know if everyone knows what non-sanctioned means, if there's a little definition, because we didn't do these activities without acknowledging and getting kind of semi-approval from both the executive officer and the legal counsel. In my case in particular, I know I asked for that, so I was out there not hanging out on a vine and representing the board without getting quite the right approval, right? But I know it's non-sanctioned because it wasn't an official board activity. There was no travel related to that, but I just feel like that might be an important distinction to make. If you don't know what non-sanctioned means, know that we're not doing this on our own without getting some kind of approval, right?
I actually think there has been discussion about relanguaging this particular part of the report, so that it makes clear that these are the things that have been formally approved by DCA, and these are the items where we are also active and out in the community describing what's going on for the Board of Psychology. And we're working on some language in that regard, or the staff is working on some language in that regard.
And even that being said about being out in the community, I still think as we relanguage it and think about it, it also isn't by any means doing it without approval and knowledge of both EO and the legal counsel is an important one, because I would never do that, and I don't think any of us would want to do that without getting some kind of clearance.
And I also just wanted to add that it's my understanding that Ms. Sork has been in active discussion with DCA counsel regarding what would be appropriate ways to express what's going on in California right now, given the current state of the legislative process and the regulatory process.
Follow-up question, if I could, on that. I think it's really important if, Ms. Sork, if you're able to go speak at ASPPB, does the board need to do anything to emphasize that we believe it's important, or can Dr. Phillips do that by way of letter when the application goes in? I'd just like to see that whatever best way we can marshal our support and belief that it's important take place.
The the request is kind of just a process by which, boards submit information on the who, what, where, when, and why. I'm happy to send a draft of the why to Dr. Phillips for review before it is sent to DCA executive for review and approval. So if you'd like, I could do that.
Since I've been successful in getting approval once before, maybe it might be helpful. And certainly doesn't hurt to have 2 sets of eyes looking at it, or 3 or 4 sets of eyes, so happy to do
Good,
that.
okay.
But actually, Dr. Erickson raises a good point, because if it is the board, shouldn't we not do some kind of motion as a full board, not just Dr. Phillips approving that? Because I think it should be, you obviously are operating on behalf of the board, but should the board have some kind of role in that? 'Cause I think you're right in terms of expressing support and really, that's part of the rationale. It sounds like it would be as a part of a board-approved motion to request that our EO be sent to wherever that is. So I'm thinking you raise a good point, Dr. Erickson.
Well, I'm wondering, it's like, I think we want her to go, and can we express that in some formal way by way of motion that might be of assistance in getting the travel approved? I don't know.
My reaction is, I'm not sure how much impact it would have on the process, but it might make the board feel more participatory, and it could add weight that we made a motion at our last board meeting to support and encourage DCA to approve the travel. And so if somebody would like to make a motion to that extent, we could certainly include that in the materials as to the why.
Yeah, and I do think, as I'm listening to you, it's beyond participatory. I think if we're saying the board is doing it, we kind of all have to be a part of that, not just you or the board president, whoever that person is, because I think it is what the board is it's our pleasure as a body. I think that would be great for this particular process, but for future processes too, because I think we should be speaking as a full board, I think.
Would you like to make a motion?
I was trying to craft it in my head. I saw Dr. Erickson.
As was I.
If I might suggest that the board make a motion to approve the outreach activities update, which is what's noticed on there, and then all the activities in that would be, have some board approval.
Oh. So it's an agenda issue, appropriately agendizing certain items. So it'd be most appropriate for us to make a motion to approve the update on all the outreach activities.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Would anybody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Second? Okay, second, Ms. Akwebudu? Okay. Any discussion among the board members?
And I guess it's just capturing what you said earlier too, about particularly for that last bullet point, that the executive officer will continue to work with DCA to ensure that the language and the presentation is in line with DCA's policies.
Is there any public comment on the motion? Mr. Glass-Steagall, will you do the honors?
So can that be a part of the motion, or what? I mean, can you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Oh, sure, I didn't know you were
Well, it's like
amending.
adding that to it.
adding that language. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
does that get us back in the problem of it not being an agendized subject?
It's agendized as a bullet. I'm sorry, I was taking some notes.
Okay.
So let me see if I capture this. To accept the outreach activities update and to ensure that the presentation given by the board at ASPBB reflect DCA's policies and direction on this issue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh.
I like that.
Well, I just got confused. I thought what you wanted reflected was not to ASPPB, but to, or any organization that we might be asked to speak to, but that we want to make sure that our support of, Ms. Sorick or whoever else reflects what DCA is requiring of us. I'm lost here.
No, Ms. Sork captured what I was saying well. It was adding on the comment that Dr. Phillips had mentioned earlier about the EO working with the DCA counsel, legal counsel, to ensure that all of the presentation is in line with the DCA piece. I just wanted to make sure that was, in addition to what's approved here in the outreach committee report, adding that kind of specific information, which I think is already happening according to what Dr. Phillips said, but just ensuring that that's a part of it, because I think that's important I think it's important to be added to what's here on this bullet point.
And if I may suggest, if we're going to have a general board policy about coordination, that we agendize that for a future board meeting?
I wasn't talking about the general piece. It was really to the motion on the floor about adopting the committee report. The piece that's missing on here, it doesn't indicate what Dr. Phillips mentioned about the work that the EO's that Ms. Orrick's currently doing with DCA Legal Counsel's office to ensure that the presentation is in line with DCA's policies.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm just, maybe, I don't know, I might have spaced out. So what you're saying is we want to make sure that any presentation, I mean, now we're talking about this potential ASPPB one, but any is in line with DCA policies.
I'm not talking about any because that's not agendized.
I know, but you're talking about this one right now.
Yes.
Okay.
So to the motion that you made, I'm asking, can we include the language that Ms. Sorick just read to make the motion fit with what's on the agenda and what's here on this report, just to add more detail to that last bullet point?
And I would
I
ask
accept
that a note be taken for future agenda items relative to having a more general policy in this regard. I don't think it would be appropriate for us to discuss that at this point. So we had a motion and you accepted the amendment, Dr. Horn, if I recall correctly?
I did, once I
Okay.
understood it.
And Ms. Cueva, do you second it? Do you accept the amendment also?
Could you encapsulate the,
Don't be looking at me.
would someone provide a brief summary of the motion as amended?
Let me see if I got it right. Dr. Horn moved to accept the outreach activities update, and the friendly amendment was to ensure that the presentation to ASPBB reflect DCA's policy on the North Carolina dental examiner's case.
Good. Okay.
Any further board discussion? Any public comment? I again rely on you, Mr. Glass-Steagall.
Thank you. Akwe-Badu.
Yes.
Erickson.
Aye.
Horn.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Well, unless I'm missing something, we've got item number 15. Access to mental health care in the state of California campaign update. Ms. Sorick?
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. The status of the Access to Mental Health Care in the State of California campaign update is included in the meeting materials. Tomorrow, there will be a presentation from the Health Professions Education Foundation. This is going to be similar to the presentation given last August to the board. It will reflect the health of the fund that license renewal fees pay for to do a loan repayment program for licensed psychologists. It will talk about, the presentation will cover the application process and when the timelines and due dates are scheduled for those. This is an ongoing outreach with that organization so they can update the board. The Outreach and Education Committee will convene on October 21st, and we will look forward to continuing the discussion about this campaign at that time.
Any board discussion on this topic at this time?
I have a question. So there are some things going through the legislature right now about this fund. Is that
There was a bill, SB 1204, Hernandez, which the board did support. It would have considered the renewal fee for psychologists amongst other boards to increase the funding for the loan repayment program. The author pulled efforts on that bill and refocused efforts on the physician loan repayment program, which became another bill. This year, as far as we know, there aren't any new or revitalized efforts into our particular loan repayment program.
Any public comment?
And I know that we're trying to finalize the dates for next year. I really hope that we're able to reschedule Dr. Belovich, I think is how you pronounce his name, for the LA meeting, because I have heard the great work he does, and I know that Ms. Arias Batia raves about his work. So, and once we get this approved, if we could kind of call him immediately, it would be great, because I think our meeting was so packed, unfortunately.
Great. Any public comment on the question of access to mental health care agenda item? Not hearing any. We will now adjourn the meeting. Just to remind you, this afternoon's business has to do with two petition hearings for early termination of probation. If that is something that is of particular interest to you, you're certainly welcome to be here, but there will be no other substantive action taken other than in closed session. Am I incorrect, Ms. Marks?
Two things, Dr. Phillips. I
Yes.
wanted to just make a small correction that the meeting's not being adjourned now. We would just be taking a break.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And because the meeting will continue after lunch. I also wanted to suggest that there are a couple things for closed session that are unrelated to the petitions, and perhaps the board would want to use its time to go into closed session before lunch to quickly take care of those items, because last time the petitions went quite late, and it would be a few things out of the way.
That would probably make a lot of sense, given that it's relatively limited material. So I think what we will do is go into closed session at this point. Our only purpose in coming back into open session will be for purposes of taking our lunch break. I did incorrectly said adjournment. And then we'll be coming back at the 1 p.m. for early termination, for the petitions on the early termination of probation. Okay, thank you.
I do want to say that I think sometimes these open hearings can be instructive to people, and if you do have the time, I want to encourage people to maybe watch and see the kinds of things that, licensees come before the board about, or so.
That's an excellent point. I agree.
I would agree with that as well. Okay, well. Turning the proceedings over for purposes of these petition hearings to Administrative Judge Michael Cohn.
Thank you. All right, we have two petition hearings today. I'll call the first one. This is the matter of the petition for termination of probation of Peter Murphy. This matter is being heard before a quorum of the Board of Psychology of the State of California. Dr. Phillips, if you would introduce the board members who are present for me, please.
Actually, we usually call rolls.
Okay, why don't we take the roll then?
Mr. Glass-Steagall, if you would do the honors.
Quibadoo,
Good afternoon, present.
Erickson,
Present.
Phillips,
Present.
Jones,
Present?
Horn.
Present.
Thank you. And my name is Michael Cohn. I am an administrative law judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I've been assigned to preside over this matter this afternoon. May I take the appearances of the parties, beginning with the Attorney General's office?
Carolyn Evans, on behalf of the people.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Michael Goach on behalf of Dr. Murphy.
Thank you. And Dr. Murphy is present with you.
Dr. Murphy is present.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, would you like to proceed, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, members of the board and Your Honor. Just want to briefly provide a background. Essentially,
Could you put the moving papers in for me first?
Sure, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce some documents into evidence. However, I want to point out that I'm introducing redacted documents pursuant to the ALJ's order. I've brought the originals in case we need to consult them. The first document is the investigative report. It's Bates number AGO 001 through 015.
Your Honor, there's no objection with one small exception. On page...
I don't have any documents before me, so. Is there a
My understanding was that the board members were supposed to provide you, the ALJ, with a copy.
I have an extra set to provide to the judge, if that's fine.
I have the originals, Your Honor, as I was mentioning, but they're not redacted.
They're not redacted, so I don't want those.
I have a copy of the redacted set. If you have no problems, I'll provide them to the judge.
Let me consult with the board first.
This is the same packet that's been provided to the board members?
I can't speak to that.
Okay, but these are the documents that you're referring to?
That is my understanding.
Okay, so this is the petition packet?
Correct.
Okay, all right, so you can describe what's in it. I'm gonna mark the petition packet collectively as Exhibit 1, and you can describe for the record what's in it.
Okay, Your Honor.
Your Honor, as I was in the midst of one objection with respect to several lines in the investigative report.
Okay, how about if we wait till we get all the documents identified, and then we can hear your objection?
No problem.
Thank you.
Would you like me to repeat the first one, or?
No, you can go on to the next one.
The second one is the petition for penalty relief, and it's Bates number AGO 016-023. The third document is the notice of hearing. It's Bates stamped AGO-24. The next document are documents related to Board of Psychology case number 1F-2010-208426. That's essentially the accusation and the decision in the underlying matter. The next document is a psychological evaluation, Bates number AGO-041-058. The next document is a declaration and CV for Dr. Bernard Brickman. The next one is declaration and CV of Dr. Lois Cozzolino. And then we have the declaration and CV of Dr. Daniel Franklin. Then we have probation reports, and that's AGO-089-091. And the last document is a license certification, AGO-092-093.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Goetz, you had an objection to a portion of one of those documents.
Right, and no objection to the rest. And
Okay.
the single objection that I have is for several lines contained on AGO-003. And those are under the first one is marked 2. It says Dr. Murphy to undergo periodic psychological evaluations by a board-appointed California licensed psychologist, the therapist to be selected by 8/10/13. And the second is under rehabilitative efforts, where it says Dr. Murphy did not undergo periodic psychological evaluations during his probationary period. I object to it not only as hearsay, but as to relevance, and it lacks foundation. At page AGO-004, the investigator goes on to state that Barbara Tanner, the probation coordinator, confirmed that Dr. Murphy was not required to undergo periodic psychological evaluations. At AGO-089, the probation report specifically states that he is to undergo a psychological evaluation and was not required to do so unless it was recommended that he do. AGO-089, the probation report shows that he was in full compliance with all terms of his probation. And at AGO-034, the disciplinary order itself stated that he was to undergo a psychological evaluation, not periodic. So on that basis, I would object. It's an obvious mistake by the investigator.
Your Honor, we don't have any objection to striking those couple of sentences on AGO-003.
All right, those sentences will be stricken on page 003. That's the number 2 and the first sentence of the rehabilitative efforts section. Those will both be stricken, and with those items out, then the balance of the petition packet will be received in evidence as Exhibit 1. All right, Ms. Evans, you can resume with your summary of the case.
Thank you, Your Honor. In 2005, the petitioner was issued a psychologist license, and in 2010, he engaged in unprofessional conduct and that he had a sexual relationship with his then psychology intern. Additionally, he failed to accurately report the nature of services that were provided in some of his bills. And eventually, the petitioner settled with the board, and in May of 2013, he was placed on 5 years probation. In late 2015, the petitioner filed a petition for early termination. Now, I just want to briefly remind the board about who has the burden. In this case, the petitioner has the burden. He has to show by clear and convincing evidence that he has reformed himself from the circumstances that led to the discipline. And in making this determination, the board may consider a couple of different factors. The first one being all of the activities of the petitioner since the disciplinary action was taken, the offense for which he was disciplined for, the petitioner's activities during the time that his certificate was in good standing, and also now the petitioner's rehabilitation efforts, and lastly, his general reputation for truth and professional ability.
Thank you. Mr. Goach?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for your attendance and your attention today. I'm going to call Dr. Murphy as our first witness and ask that he be sworn.
Thank you. Would you rise to be sworn, Doctor? Do you solemnly state, under penalty of perjury, that the testimony you'll give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Have a seat, sir. And would you please state your name for the record?
Dr. Peter Murphy.
Thank you. Mr. Goach?
Yes. Dr. Murphy, since January 2005, when you were licensed, what type of practice have you been engaged in?
I have a psychotherapy practice that where I treat children, adolescents, parents, and families. Focuses a lot on young people with learning, attention, and other emotional and behavioral regulation disorders. So as part of treating these children, I also have to really focus a lot on parenting skills and address their needs as well.
And have you practiced psychology continuously before, during, and since the incidents which gave rise to discipline?
Yes.
Have you ever been in trouble with the board prior to the investigation which led to the disciplinary order in this matter?
No.
Have you ever been in trouble with the law during your lifetime?
No.
And that includes after the time that discipline was imposed by the board?
That's correct.
What are your current goals with respect to your practice?
Well, I want to continue practicing the way I do, but I also would like to expand what I do. I have one of my main goals is to be able to write a book for clinicians on how to provide or how to treat children, adolescents, and support parents with learning disorders and related conditions.
And did you make any efforts to begin such a publication?
I've put a lot of time and effort into this kind of publication. I actually, the book proposal was accepted by Norton. However, it was terminated when I disclosed to them my current status with the Board of Psychology.
And what is your understanding of why discipline was imposed upon you?
Well, there's three things. One is having a romantic relationship and sexual relationship with my intern. Two, not keeping adequate records, like case notes. And three, there was a dispute about a billing for the supervision, which was mistakenly billed as psychotherapy when it was not.
And approximately when did your relationship with your then intern begin?
Approximately March of 2009.
And how old was your intern?
My intern was 48.
And how old were you at the time?
50.
At the time, were you aware of the proscription of engaging in a relationship with a supervisee that was imposed by APA Ethics Code 7.07?
I was not.
When did you become aware of that prescription?
I became aware of that prescription in the fall of 2010 when I received a letter from the medical board stating that there was an investigation into this matter.
And did you take any steps with respect to your supervision of the intern at that time?
Well, as soon as I got the letter, I consulted with you, my attorney, who immediately told me that this was an ethics code violation and that this relationship had to be this intern or supervision relationship had to be terminated immediately, which we then did and found my intern an alternative supervisor.
And are you still in a relationship with your then intern?
I am. We got married in July of 2013.
And do you remain married?
Yes, very happily.
Now, the failure to maintain adequate records for a patient, what do you attribute that to?
Well, first of all, I wasn't, again, as aware of as I should have been of the ethics, of the APA ethics standards of practice on that particular matter. However, since that time, I've made corrections to that.
And have you implemented those corrections into your practice?
I have. I've actually paid for an online therapy notes program where I can document notes immediately after sessions. And so I very carefully do that after each session.
As to the billing error, what do you attribute that to?
That was a clerical error, and during the initial investigation, I had provided the investigators with a letter to confirm that that was a clerical error on the part of my billing company.
And have you taken any steps to improve your practice in any manner with respect to review of billing?
I have. I'm just, pay a lot closer attention to detail. I have a lot more communication with my billing company back and forth. But I, double and triple check my bills each month to make sure that they're accurate to the best of my ability.
Were those erroneous bills submitted to any insurance companies?
No, they were not.
Now, the stipulated decision and order placed some conditions upon your practice, did it not?
It did.
And just very generally and briefly, what were they?
Well, one, I need to follow all laws and regulations. Two, I cannot provide supervision to any interns. Three, I needed to retake the ethics exam. I also needed to reimburse the state for investigation costs, which I did do to the tune of $11,000. I need to complete quarterly reports for the Board of Psychology. I also needed to do 50 hours of individual psychotherapy, which I did complete and continue to do. And I also have to pay yearly, reimburse the Board of Psychology yearly for the cost of supervision of my probation, which is approximately a little over $1,000 a year.
Approximately when did you complete the ethics course that you were required to take?
It was in August 8th of 2013.
Well, there was a course that you took, correct?
Oh, there was a law and ethics course that I did take as part of my continuing education, and that was on April 25th of 2000, or completed on April 25th of 2015.
And did you complete the ethics exam as well?
I did.
And approximately when did you do that?
That was on August 8th, 2013.
Have you maintained all of your requirements with respect to your continuing education courses?
I have.
And you've indicated that you've paid the investigative fees and costs?
I have.
And have you timely paid all probation costs?
I have.
Have you timely submitted all your quarterly reports?
I have.
Do you believe that you're ever going to violate the ethics rules again?
Absolutely not.
And what assurance can you give the board that that won't occur?
Well, first of all, I've never been in any kind of legal trouble in my life. Secondly, this has been a very, very challenging process that I would never want to put myself through again, or anybody else. Third is I take the ethics code very seriously, and in spite of what's happened, my attitude about the ethics code hasn't changed. This has never been a pattern of behavior that I have engaged in before. It's really kind of a one-time situation. The relationship has been extremely important, and really altered the quality of my life in a very positive way. And I value what I do, and I'm not cavalier about the way I conduct business or the way I treat my clients.
With respect to your responsibility for these violations of the code, do you accept responsibility for that?
I accept full responsibility for every part of it. These are my mistakes. I should have known the ethics code, so I accept full responsibility.
Now, as part of your conditions of probation, you were required to undergo 50 hours of psychotherapy, correct?
Correct.
And did you complete those 50 hours?
I did complete it.
And who was your psychotherapist?
Dr. Bernard Brickman.
And is Dr. Brickman here today?
Yes, to my right.
Did you elect to continue in psychotherapy after you completed the 50 hours?
I did.
And are you still undergoing psychotherapy?
Yes, I am.
And is that with Dr. Brickman?
That's correct.
Now, have you engaged in any pro bono services since having discipline imposed?
I have. There is a local private school not far from my office where I did conduct a teacher in service a couple summers ago. I also then followed up by conducting 3 parent in services over the course of the year. In addition, I also met with a group of junior high age students following the abrupt termination of one of their teachers. And so I met with them as a group. I also made myself available to meet individually at the school for any students who wanted to talk one-to-one. And then also, because I do a lot of work with schools, I will get calls from different educators for, just advice on how to handle certain situations with kids that may have some learning and attention issues in the classroom. And I do talk with them, and I do not charge for that time.
Thank you. Do you continue to consult with the school that is located near your office?
I do on an as-needed basis.
Why is it you seek to have your probation terminated at this time?
Well, I think personally, it's been a very, very difficult process. I realize that's not a reason for, to terminate it, but I would also like to be able to move past this in my own life. I would also like to make a contribution to the field in the form of this book that I would like to get out there, because I do think it could be helpful to a lot of clinicians who work with this population of children and families. Certainly the probation does interfere with that, because I do have to explain to potential publishers where things stand. And I'd like to expand different areas of my practice as well. And so I really would like to get this behind me from a personal standpoint. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, and is it your understanding that the disciplinary action, even if your probation is terminated, will remain a public record?
I do understand that.
I will wait till the end to have Dr. Murphy make his statement to the board. So I'll submit him for cross-examination at this point.
Thank you.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Murphy.
Good afternoon.
Do you agree that a boundaries violation constitutes serious unprofessional conduct?
I do.
And you mentioned that you had taken or completed an ethics course and also a law and the ethics. Can you explain why it's important to maintain boundaries between a psychologist and an intern or somebody you hold supervisory authority over?
Well, first of all, I think that you don't want to compromise the supervisorial relationship in any way, and that you do not want to compromise the quality of care to clients and patients, clients or patients. And also, because I'm in a supervisorial role, you don't want to compromise the quality of supervision you're providing or your objectivity to the person that you are, who's under your supervision.
And are you currently up to date on the Board of Psychology's ethical code?
I am.
And what would you do in the future if you found yourself having romantic feelings for somebody that you held supervisory authority over?
Well, what I would immediately do is find them another supervisor.
And Dr. Karbaling had recommended in his evaluation that you join a local professional organization, such as the LA County Psychological Association. Did you happen to join?
I haven't. I have not, but I have no opposition to joining that.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything else, Mr. Goetz?
No redirect for Dr. Murphy.
All right, so you're going to wait for his closing statement till after the witness has testified as well?
That's correct, Your Honor.
All right, and Dr. Brickman is your next witness?
That's correct.
Doctor, would you rise to be sworn? Raise your right hand, sir. Do you solemnly state, under penalty of perjury, that the testimony you'll give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Have a seat there. Dr. Murphy, if you would move the microphone over to Dr. Brickman for me, please. And would you, wait, just 1 second. Would you state your name for the record, sir?
Bernard Brickman, MD.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Goetz.
Besides being a medical doctor, do you hold any other degrees?
Yes, I hold a PhD in psychoanalysis.
And what is your field of practice?
Adult psychotherapy and psychoanalysis.
And how long have you been licensed by the California Medical Board?
Since 1958.
Do you hold any board certifications?
Yes, I do.
And Who has issued you a certification?
The American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology.
And approximately when were you board certified by that board?
Since that was in 1970.
And what is your current status with the board?
I'm in good status.
Are you a diplomat?
Yes, I am.
Do you hold any other certifications? Strike that. Were you ever certified by the American Psychoanalytic Association?
Yes, I was.
And approximately when were you so certified?
I believe it was around 1981.
And is that the same organization that awarded you your PhD?
It is.
Did you ever hold any positions, any teaching positions in connection with psychiatry?
Yes, I have.
And with whom?
With the UCLA School of Medicine, and also with the Southern California Psychoanalytic Institute, and with the Institute of Contemporary Psychoanalysis.
I'm going to hand you the witness book. Direct your attention to pages AGO 061 and 062. Is that a copy of your curriculum vitae?
Yes, it is.
And is the information contained therein true and correct?
Yes, it is.
Approximately how long have you, strike that, approximately how long has Dr. Murphy been a patient of yours?
For approximately 16 years.
Were you approved by the Board of Psychology to provide ongoing psychotherapy as part of the conditions of Dr. Murphy's disciplinary order?
Yes, I was.
And did you do so?
Yes, I did.
And did Dr. Murphy attend the requisite amount of psychotherapy sessions?
Yes, he did.
And does he continue to be a patient of yours?
Yes.
Did you submit any evaluation, strike that, did you submit any evaluation reports or quarterly reports to the Board of Psychology during that 1-year period?
Yes, as I was requested to.
Did you ever find any evidence of psychopathology in your evaluations of Dr. Murphy?
No.
Did you based on your experience, training, and evaluation of Dr. Murphy, do you find that he poses any threat to the public in his functioning as a psychologist?
He poses, in my opinion, no threat in any way.
Okay, if I may approach, Your Honor, I'm going to turn your attention to AGO 021. And this is a therapy information sheet. Is this in your handwriting?
Yes, it is.
And is this something that you were aware was being submitted to the board as part of Dr. Murphy's petition to terminate probation?
Yes.
Is it still your belief that your goals of therapy with Dr. Murphy were achieved?
Yes.
based on your knowledge, experience, training, and evaluation of Dr. Murphy, do you have any opinions as to his abilities as a psychologist?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
In my opinion, he is a dedicated psychologist and is proficient in dealing with some of the most difficult cases that I have ever run into, and he addresses them with a great deal of professional skill and competence.
Have you formed an opinion as to the likelihood of a recurrence of disciplinary issues occurring with Dr. Murphy?
Yes, I have.
And what is that opinion?
In my opinion, I believe that it is extremely unlikely that the circumstances could recur in which he would repeat the unprofessional conduct that he has been charged with. And I believe that he's completely safe to work with the public.
During your conversations and sessions with Dr. Murphy, has he ever expressed remorse to you?
Yes, he has.
And essentially, what did he state?
He felt remorseful that he had failed to, before he was aware of the unprofessional conduct, he was remorseful that he did not refer the intern to someone else.
And did Dr. Murphy ever discuss with you whether he was, in fact, aware of the APA prescription against a relationship with a supervisee at the time that he initially engaged in that relationship until he terminated his position with her?
Yes.
What was your recollection of that?
My recollection of it was that he was remorseful that he had continued to work with the intern and had not referred her to someone else, and he felt very guilty about that.
And did he express that opinion before or after he became aware of the APA prescription?
Afterwards.
Did you ever speak with Dr. Arnold Karbelnig as part of Dr. Karbelnig's evaluation of Dr. Murphy?
Yes, I did.
Did you inform Dr. Karbelnig that Dr. Murphy had no knowledge at the time that his romantic relationship with his intern violated his ethical responsibilities?
Yes, I did.
Now, have you had the opportunity to review portions of the investigator's report relating to her interview with you?
Yes, I have.
And I'm going to refer you to a portion of AGO 010. And in the last sentence of the third full paragraph, it states, and I quote, "He told me that they fell in love, and his awareness that this was unethical was..." Which page are you on? I'm sorry, Your Honor. AGO 010.
That's what you said. I looked at 001. Okay, I got you.
Okay, and it's the third full paragraph, last sentence. He told me that they fell in love, and his awareness that this was unethical was mixed in with the feelings that they had and that this was right. Now, this statement that Dr. Murphy made to you, Was this after he informed you that he became aware of the prescription of the ethics code?
Yes, it was, afterwards.
And the next full sentence, it says, Dr. Brickman said that Dr. Murphy was aware that in the, quote, eyes of the board, end quote, he was aware that he had violated an ethical principle, but in his eyes, he was also engaged in a relationship that was life-saving to him. And once again, was this statement made before or after Dr. Murphy indicated that he became aware of the requirements of the APA?
That was afterwards.
And finally, on the next page, AGO 011, there's a portion of a first paragraph, and the last line states, he felt like he was doing something wrong in the eyes of the BOP, but this was mixed with the contradictory feeling that his actions were right. Once again, was this statement made before or after?
Afterwards.
Were you discussing, in essence, the conflict that had arisen within Dr. Murphy after he had made this realization and was looking at his relationship in connection therewith?
Could you repeat that question?
I'll restate it. That was stated a little sloppily. Was this a reflection that Dr. Murphy was stating that was creating some conflict in him after he became aware of the prescription?
Yes.
Has Dr. Murphy discussed with you at all his goals with respect to expanding his practice by writing?
He has, to a considerable degree.
And what is your understanding from those discussions?
My understanding is that he would like to expand his professional activities. He wants to be able to write, and he has started writing a book. And he's also interested in exploring the possibility of doing some sports psychology. He wants to enlarge his practice so that he's able to treat more adults in individual psychotherapy and not limit his practice to families and children.
Okay, and finally, I'm going to direct your attention to AGO 059 and 060. Do you recognize this document as a declaration that you provided on Dr. Murphy's behalf?
Yes, I do.
And you signed that under penalty of perjury back in October of 2015, correct?
Correct.
Have any of your opinions as stated in that declaration changed in any manner?
No, they have not.
And do the statements remain true and correct today?
Yes.
No further questions.
Yes, just one question. Dr. Brickman, do you believe that the public will be protected if Dr. Murphy is given a free and clear license with no probationary terms?
Yes, I do.
No further questions.
All right, we'll see if the board has questions. I neglected to give the chance the board to ask Dr. Murphy questions, but they will have that opportunity shortly. Dr. Phillips, any questions for Dr. Brickman?
Yes. Good afternoon, Dr. Brickman.
Good afternoon.
You were aware at the time that Dr. Murphy entered into the relationship with his intern that she was a married woman?
Objection, relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled. Were you aware of that?
I'm trying to think. Yes,
And you were aware that he was having a sexual relationship with an intern, correct?
yes.
Did you advise him in any way to consider the propriety of those actions?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Erickson?
No questions at this time. I hope I might have if we go around again, I might have a question.
Okay, Ms. Akwe-Badu?
Not at this time.
Ms. Jones?
I do not.
Dr. Horn?
Not at this time, thanks.
Okay, this is your time again, Dr. Erickson. Now or never.
Came around fast.
Are these for Dr. Brickman you're talking about?
Dr. Brickman only, yes.
Oh, Dr. Brickman.
No, you'll have a chance with Dr. Murphy in just a minute.
No questions that would be relevant here for our proceedings.
All right, thank you for your testimony, Dr. Brickman.
Thank you.
Dr. Murphy would like to make a statement to the board, and it is up to Your Honor and the board whether he does so before or after their questioning.
I would like him to make his statement now. And Doctor, you remain under oath, so this is going to be considered as evidence. And then after that statement, then we'll give the board a chance to ask
Thank you.
questions. So, Dr. Murphy, what else did you wish to say to the board this afternoon?
Well, I just wanted to reiterate a couple of points. First of all, I appreciate all of you taking the time to consider my petition. Secondly, I really do take these charges, I take the whole disciplinary action very, very seriously, and I take full responsibility for everything that has taken place. I've been a special educator for 12 years before I became a clinical psychologist, so working with this population of people has really been a vocation for me. This is certainly an error, a mistake on my part that I would never want to repeat. I take the work extremely seriously. I'm very devoted to my clients and to the work and to the ethics code. So again, I appreciate you taking the time just to consider this petition.
All right, thank you. Based upon that, any further questions, Ms. Evans?
No, Your Honor.
All right, now we'll see what questions the board might have for Dr. Murphy. Dr. Phillips.
Dr. Murphy, as part of your graduate education, I assume you were required to take a class in law and ethics?
Correct.
And in the course of that class in law and ethics, you were asked to read the APA Ethics Code?
I believe so, yes.
And subsequent to passing the national licensing exam, you were asked to take, did you take an oral exam or did you take a written exam?
I took a written exam, but it wasn't a national exam. It was just a California State exam.
Right.
Yes.
And did that involve questions of law and ethics?
There's a separate jurisprudence exam in California.
So you did take a jurisprudence exam in order to get your license?
Yes. I did.
Okay. How many hours have you devoted to educating yourself as to the current ethical legal principles since the time you went on probation?
Well, I did take, as part of my continuing ed requirement, I did take a 6-hour course on law and ethics. But in addition to that, I put in a substantial amount of time in preparation for retaking the law and ethics exam for the state as part of the stipulation.
Mm-hmm. In the context of your understanding of the APA Ethics Code, what is a multiple relationship?
A multiple relationship would be one where you're involved with a client maybe in different domains, like not only treating them as a client, but also having some other kind of business relationship or some other like relationship with him outside of the therapeutic relationship.
So, for instance, with your current wife, you had a relationship with her as the mother of a patient, as an intern.
Former patient.
A former patient. But she did come to you for therapeutic services for a child.
Yes.
Correct? You also saw the husband in that context?
No.
The husband never came in for a couple of
The
visits?
husband came in for maybe 2 visits in the time that I treated my now stepson.
Okay. And then she became your intern?
Correct.
And then she became your sexual partner?
Correct.
And then she became your wife?
That's right.
What is the concern, particularly as it relates to the supervisory relationship? What's the primary concern about entering into a sexual relationship with a supervisor or supervisee, excuse me?
Well, the biggest concern would be is that some kind of coercion involved in that relationship, in terms of a power differential. Also, does it compromise the objectivity of the supervisor in providing an adequate level of supervision for that person? And also, does it potentially compromise the care of the clients that the intern is actually treating?
And none of those considerations were in your mind when you entered into a sexual relationship with your intern?
At that time, no.
Can you help me to understand why that wouldn't have occurred
At the
to you?
time, first of all, at the time, I didn't know I was doing something wrong. I should have, and that's my responsibility. But secondly, even though that was taking place, I also, continued to be very committed to providing a high level of supervision to her in the treatment of the people that she was, taking on as patients. So, again, I value that process, that supervisorial process, and the 3,000 hours that required to acquire a license. That's not something I have ever felt like I want to just, short circuit or somehow not take seriously.
So I can better understand, there were bills that were created for the hours for supervision.
Correct.
That showed them to be psychotherapy.
Right.
That's what the bill said.
That's right.
That bill was never sent to an insurance company.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you understand how in your office procedures those bills would have been created for a supervisory hour?
It's what I do is keep a list of the people I see. I think that her name was on that list, but usually there are diagnoses, and I think there was a clerical error that ended up putting a diagnosis on there, and so it looked like a therapy bill, when in fact it wasn't. It was purely for supervision, and in fact, she was seeing another psychotherapist at the time.
Were you the one that prepared the bills?
I'm not the one that prepares the bill. I actually, the way my system works is I have my names, I have the dates that I then provide to a biller, who then puts those into billing statements and sends them out.
Okay, so that's where that would have happened?
Correct.
Is there some reason she never sent those bills out, he or she?
Never sent.
The bills out for the hours of supervision that were being shown with a diagnosis?
Well, she did send the bill. My billing person did send the bills out
to
my intern
for payment for supervision.
Correct. Okay. And she paid for the supervision, but did not submit them for insurance because she knew what they were.
Okay. I noticed and I'm going to refer you to page AGO 19.
Yeah.
In particular, your answer to question number 6.
AGO 19.
AGO 19.
That's it, the petition for modification.
The top of the page, it says petition for modification. Do you see which page I'm referring to?
Yes.
Okay. And this was part of the paperwork that you prepared for purposes
Correct.
of this petition, and to the best of your knowledge, this was all accurate when you prepared it. And item number 6, you said there was no victim. Do you stand by that statement?
I do.
I have no further questions.
Dr. Erickson?
Hello, Dr. Murphy.
Hi.
A couple of questions. What year did you graduate with your PhD?
1997.
Do you think the ethical code of the American Psychological Association has gone through various revisions in the last 50 years?
Yes.
I don't know in the coursework you've taken, and I don't know the answer to this, but whether the impropriety and proscription of having a sexual relationship with a supervisee was as clearly spelled out 50 years ago as it is today. Do you have any knowledge of that?
I do not.
I think things have gradually become more firm and clear about that being prohibited, but I don't know the answer to that question either. A second question, you became involved with a family member of a former patient. Do you have thoughts on when that might be okay and when that would be ill-advised? I'm thinking time from when termination of therapy has taken place, the nature of the relationship. In this case, it's the mother of, I believe, the patient you treated.
Right.
Could you comment just a little bit about that area, which could be problematic in some cases?
Well, yeah, the relationship began close to 2 years after I had terminated therapy with the intern's son. And we had terminated therapy because he was transitioning to a special education school where therapy would be provided on campus. She was, my intern, my now wife, was in a very difficult marriage. And I was coming out of a difficult marriage as well. So that's kind of how this situation emerged. In terms of, I think, trying to address your question, yeah, I can see how it would be, create a lot of difficulty maybe for the patient and any other family members involved in the circumstance, and so which is why this is not something I would ever entertain in the future.
And I believe when I read the documents that we have in front of us that you have a good relationship with your former patient at this time.
I do.
I'm wondering, theoretically or hypothetically, it's possible that there could be a strain if somebody becomes a stepfather to a former patient. And in this case, I think that happened, but are you aware of any ill effects or tension or harm that may have accrued to your former patient?
One of the things that we've been able to provide is a very stable household, because he lives with us 50% of the time, and then he stays with his father 50% of the time. And, things have settled down significantly in the past 3 years. And I have a very comfortable relationship with him. There's, no awkwardness. We relate very well. I think I have a very good understanding of his needs. He's on the autism spectrum. So I'm certainly very supportive of that. And so at this point, he seems to have managed it quite well, even the transition back and forth from our home to his father's home.
Good. No further questions. Thank you.
Ms. Akwe-Badu?
Thank you. by getting off of probation early, how does this enhance your book publication deal? Or does it not?
I'm not. I'm hoping it would, because my status would, with the board would be, I would no longer be on probation. I would like to publish the book no matter what, because I just feel like it's a valuable contribution. I know that what has taken place is always going to be part of the public record, and any time that I have worked at a school or worked with a publisher, in this case, I've always informed them of my status with the board so that it doesn't become a surprise. Unfortunately, this is the first time where it's hurt me. In most cases, my relationships with people in the community have been such that they're very comfortable with having me participate in their institutions or programs that they run. I think, in part to answer your question, I just think also for my own, and I realize this is not a reason you would make a decision about this, but it's just from a psychological standpoint, it's been very, very difficult. And I know that doesn't factor into it for you, but that's, I would like to get this behind me.
2 more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Internally, what made you become aware, or when did you think that you were doing something wrong internally? At what juncture, what point?
Well, I think internally, when I received the letter, and that was, I have to say, quite a blow, because again, I have never been in any kind of legal trouble of any kind, and that's when I, really felt it, and from that point on, it was a real challenge for me to kind of cope with it, cope with the guilt around it, cope with the shame around it, so that's.
Lastly, just to, and kind of a follow-up to your question, response, Dr. Phillips. How do you reconcile this when it's asked on page 19, question 4, do you accept full responsibility for the behavior that led to your license or registration being disciplined? And you marked, yes, I think, or what did you say there? Yes. Now, how do you reconcile number 4 and number 6? How do you think your action or inaction affected the victim, and you said there was no victim? How do you reconcile those 2?
Well, I guess that's a good question. I think that if there was a victim, if I had to, reflect on that, I could say that my stepson was a victim. I could say his father was a victim, even though he didn't participate much in the therapeutic process. At the same time, and I'm not justifying this in any way, there has been some very positive changes to their lives since that time, to the lives of my stepchildren.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Jones?
Dr. Murphy, thank you, Judge. Yeah, I guess I had the same kind of question that Ms. Badu had about when you referred to Dr. Phillips' question that you stand by it. I guess you've answered that unless there was something else you wanted to say how you stand by the fact that there were no victims.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, how that could be viewed, and I understand that other people were affected by this relationship. And that is the case. There's no taking away from that. But I also know that as I said before, there's been a lot of positive changes that have improved the quality of the lives of my 2 stepchildren in the process.
And I know that sexual misconduct is one of the causes of discipline. There are 3 others. And I know that you mentioned some of your, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Mr. Goach. Mr. Goach. Oh, and Mr. Goach was asking you questions, and you mentioned some of your practices and more communication and with billing and that type of thing. Did this cause you to go back and look at any of your other records of those patients at that time, and just to double check to make sure nothing else in terms of the other causes of discipline were out of line with your services?
Absolutely, yes.
And I guess my final question is, and I think I was tracking, but I think I may have missed it, on AGO 1010, so page 10, I guess the 4th full paragraph, when Dr. Brickman, and I don't think this is for Dr. Brickman, it's really a question for you, but when Dr. Brickman said that you were aware in the eyes of the board that it was a violation of ethical principle, but you also were engaged in a relationship that was life-saving to you. I guess in terms of, as you think about your term of probation so far, at some point, have you thought more about how you have to kind of weigh out what you do in terms of the benefit for yourself and for the benefit of the profession and consumer protection?
Every day.
Could you give me an example, kind of how that's caused you to give pause on that?
I think with every client I treat, I take that into consideration, and I still, to be quite honest, struggle with that conflict. Even though I've been disciplined for this, I still personally struggle with the fact that I was in this situation, and I'm truly remorseful for it. I feel bad about it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Horn?
Thank you, Judge. And Dr. Murphy, I just have a couple of questions. So, given that the Code of Ethics, you take it very seriously, I'm hearing that you take your work very seriously, you very respectful or want to respect the work you do, the clients you work with, etc.
In the profession.
Why don't you think you knew what the Code of Ethics were surrounding the things that you were doing professionally, like around supervision or multiple relationships or those things?
I wish I had a better answer for you. I don't. I should have. I should have known. And I don't know what to tell you about that. I should have known.
Also, I understand that Dr. Karbelnig had recommended that maybe you would join the local psych association or something like that to sort of be in a group among colleagues. And you said you weren't opposed to it, but you hadn't really done it. Can you talk about that or speak to that?
To be very honest, it's an oversight on my part because that evaluation, I think, was completed in 2012.
Right.
So while I did not do that for no other reason than it was an oversight on my part, I do work collaboratively with many professionals, and in fact, a couple of them who completed declarations on my behalf. We have actually worked closely together for a number of years on teacher training and in-servicing. So again, that's my oversight. I do have no opposition to it, but that's why I did not do it yet.
So does that mean you will be doing it? I'm not sure.
I would happily do that. Yes,
Okay.
I will.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board members?
I just had a follow-up question. So exactly how many classroom hours of continuing education for law and ethics have you had since the time you went on, since the time that you were originally charged with this?
Sure. I did 6 hours of a continuing education course, but then in addition, I'm sorry?
In addition, you took the exam.
I did, and I put a lot of hours into the preparation for that because I needed to pass that by a certain date to continue practicing even on probation.
And you had to I think you had to do that by 2013,
Correct.
if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
How many hours of continuing education about law and ethics have you had since 2013?
Well, the 6 hours of the continuing ed course to meet my continuing ed requirements, and then ongoing conversations with colleagues about law and ethics as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So that 6-hour class was the one you completed in April of 2015? Correct. Okay. Any other questions from council? Nope.
No, Your Honor.
Any further evidence from either side?
No.
Any closing statement, Ms. Evans?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Goach,
I'll try to be brief.
please.
I thank the board for its time, and I just wish to remind the board of essentially restating what Ms. Evans stated in the beginning. Our focus here is not to rehash the accusation. Our focus here is to look at efforts of rehabilitation, and this is specified in the regulations at Title 16, Section 1395. And those matters that are relevant here are the nature and severity of the acts, subsequent bad acts, which we've had none, the time elapsed since the acts which resulted in the discipline, and this occurred February 2009 through November 2010, which is nearly 6 years at this point. The compliance with terms of probation and other sanctions, which the evidence shows he's fully complied. And his rehabilitation efforts have included pro bono work, educating himself, and adopting his practice to have a better control over what he's doing with respect to his billing, his record keeping, and I think he certainly knows about the prescription of ABA 7.07 at this point. I would also like to have the board take into effect that we have declarations not only by Dr. Brickman, but by Dr. Cozzolino and Dr. Franklin that indicate that Dr. Murphy is a very, very good and competent practitioner. We have no evidence whatsoever that Dr. Murphy poses any danger to the public. Dr. Karbelnig in his report made that finding. Dr. Brickman has also made it. I believe that under these circumstances, we have adequately met our burden by clear and convincing evidence that there has been rehabilitation on the part of Dr. Murphy, and we'd respectfully request that the termination be the probation be terminated. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, this matter is now submitted and the record is closed. The board will hear its next case in a couple of minutes, and after both cases have been heard, they will adjourn to executive sessions to make the decisions on those cases, and the parties will be notified by mail. The board will not be making an oral decision today, an oral announcement today.
At this point,
And you are excused, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, before you go, though, I have to give you the court reporter form. The court reporter.
Certainly.
How many pages, Carly? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Which one? The ones I just went to in the Oh, is it Lino? C-O-Z or C-O-S?
All right, I'm going to open the record in the matter of the petition for termination of probation of Christopher Barr. This matter is being heard before a quorum of the Board of Psychology of the State of California. The board members present, I'll just list them. Dr. Stephen Phillips, Nicole Jones, Lucille Akayo-Badu, Dr. Michael Erickson, and Dr. Jacqueline Horn. My name is Michael Cohn. I'm an administrative law judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I've been assigned to preside over this matter. Could I take the appearances of the people, please?
Carolyn Evans on behalf of the people.
Thank you. And the petitioner, Dr. Barr, is present and representing himself, correct?
Correct.
Right. And I just had a brief discussion with Dr. Barr and Ms. Evans. Dr. Barr was present for our prior petition hearing, and he understands the procedures and how this all works. So, with that being said, I have been provided with a copy of the petition packet, which I will mark as Exhibit Number 1 and receive in evidence if there are no objections to it, but I will ask Ms. Evans to describe the contents of it for me, for the record, that is.
Thank you, Your Honor. The first document is the investigative report. It's Bates number AGO-001 through 007. The second document is the petition for penalty relief, and that's Bates number AGO-008-019 for jurisdictional purposes. The third document is the notice of hearing, Bates AGO-20-21. The next set is the decision and order related to case number 1F 2013-232-125, and the Bates are 022 through 39. Then we have conviction records, which are related to the 2006 driving under the influence, and it's Bates stamped AGO-040-055. Next, we have conviction records related to the 2009 driving under the influence conviction, and that is AGO-056-074. We have a DOJ summary of convictions report, that's AGO-075-077. And then documents related to the clearance of the DUI conviction pursuant to Penal Code Section 1203.4, and this is AGO-078-085. Then we have letters of support submitted by the petitioner, and that is AGO-0866-101. And then there are probation reports and a psychological evaluation, AGO 102 through 151. And finally, we have the license certification, which is AGO 152.
All right, thank you. As indicated, those will all be received as Exhibit Number 1. Ms. Evans, a summary of the case?
Yes. In 2013, the petitioner applied for a psychology assistance registration, and the application was denied, and a statement of issues was filed. The statement of issues was based essentially on the petitioner's 2 criminal convictions for driving under the influence. And in early 2014, the petitioner settled with the board, and in March 2013, he was issued a probationary license. and he was placed on 3 years probation. He was required to complete a psychological evaluation, abstain from alcohol and drugs, participate in a biological fluid testing program, and to participate in alcohol support meetings and complete an ethics course. In March of 2016, the petitioner filed a petition for early termination of relief.
Thank you. Dr. Barr, would you rise to be sworn, sir? You solemnly state, under penalty of perjury, that the testimony you'll give in this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Have a seat there, sir. Would you state your name for the record?
Christopher Barr.
Thank you. Doctor, before your testimony, just let me give you one little additional advisement, and that is that the board has received all of these documents that we've just referred to. They're familiar with the circumstances of your case and why you were placed on probation in the first place. What they're interested in hearing from you is what you have done by way of rehabilitation since that time. You don't really need to go into the circumstances of why you were disciplined. The board may ask you some questions about it, but in your initial statement, you don't need to go into that. Really, you should focus on your rehabilitative efforts. Okay? With that being said, what did you want to tell the board this afternoon?
Yes, well, first of all, I'd just like to say that I appreciate the opportunity of being here today. I appreciate having been able to start out on a probationary basis with the board. It's been difficult still, but it's because of my actions why I'm here right now. And so basically, since that time, and I have to say that what I did was not good. It was irresponsible to drive under the influence. There's no doubt about that. And along the way, I was able to recognize that I'm an alcoholic. And in the end, that's been quite a revelation and quite a positive, ironic as it might initially seem, fact in my life. It talks about what's required, one meeting a week in the program. If we're involved, we tend to do quite a few more, but so I have documented at least 3 per week, and it's just what I do. And so, in addition to that, I'm very involved in the groups that I work with. I've secretaried meetings. I do setup right now for my home group. In my exhibit, which was the petition for early termination, I said I was sponsoring 4 guys. Now it's 5. I work with a bunch of guys. And, that keeps me in the book, in the AA book, and it keeps me focused on my sobriety. It keeps me in the principles of what I want to do to have a positive life for a lot of different reasons. And when I think about this whole process, when I think about what I've learned, I think really, and I work at Salvation Army in a rehabilitation facility, and so my lived experience is very directly relevant to the work that I would like to do going forward as well. So not only that, but having done therapy, having been in therapy for three years, I started to learn a lot more about myself, and that kind of went hand in hand with the AA process because, in AA, a lot has to do with selfishness, with thinking of myself, it's a bit ironic as well in my chosen profession, and naturally I always immerse myself in my patients and their experience when I work with them. But I think in my outside life, there are ways that I was less aware. I was really, honestly speaking, I was worried about judgment and a lot of things about what people might think of me. Those were important focuses of therapy, which in meetings we talk about those same things too. And what we can't control, which is what other people think of me. But it doesn't stop me from thinking about it for quite some time, and I still do at times, of course. But I have a way of dealing with that now, and that's through my program of recovery. And I take it very seriously, but I also enjoy it. I mean, as I say, I work with a lot of guys. My own sponsor, I've had him now so I've been sober since the 24th of June of 2010, and the convictions in question, one's nearly 10 years ago, the other about 7.5, and I mean, they happened, and I put myself in those positions which were unsafe and which were dangerous. Nobody was hurt. Nothing along those lines happened, thankfully, not that it couldn't have behaving that way. And so, but since that time, I mean, it's not even since the initiation of my probation, it's just since, so I can, well, at any rate, I had a conversation with a professor of mine who, it's in some of the materials that I have. There's the petition, but then there's when I also initially applied for psychological assisted registration, and I detailed the process by which I became more and more aware. I knew it wasn't anything good to be driving while drinking, but I was in the grips of alcoholism. The way that I drank was on the weekends, primarily, and just the way that I drank. Some drink every day. It wasn't my case. Not that I never drank during the week as well, but it was the problems that I got into, which I'll describe as just briefly now, is that when I drank, I didn't make good decisions at all, and so I can't drink, and that's okay. And not only that, but there's a very supportive network, and I can't drink, but then I have to do things to continue my sobriety, to maintain what I have, which is very positive relationships. I wrote in my materials as well that I had more sort of fleeting contacts before. That was true in large part. I did have people that were in my life, family members, and people who I know today as well from different points in my life. But, they don't go out and drink in unsafe ways. They're solid people in my life. And then I've made a whole lot of really great friends. And so, I mean, it's something that I'm actually grateful for. I think I had to go through what I went through. The problems that came from it are very obvious and clear and worthy of discipline. Now, however, as I say, I've been sober for more than 6 years. I think that every thing I could possibly have done, I've tried to do, and I'm just going to continue doing that. That's just what I do. It's just part of me now. So I think that's about it.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, any questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Mark. Can you
I think you need to turn your microphone on.
Thank you. What type of work are you currently doing?
Yes, I'm working with substance abuse clients at Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation Center in San Jose.
At what center?
Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation
Adult
Center in San Jose, yes.
Can you tell us what role you have in the Salvation Army?
Yes. I work with, I do groups, I facilitate groups, and I also do primarily individual psychotherapy. I do 2 groups during the week. And then I also see a minimum of 10 clients. I was seeing 15 before. I'm also studying for EPPP. I'm doing various... Oh, sorry. Studying for the EPPP exam for licensure and various other things I can get into, too.
And you stated that you are currently participating in a recovery program about 3 times a week? Is that correct?
Yes, at least 3 times.
And how long are those meetings generally?
They're hour-long meetings.
And what role do you play in those meetings?
Well, sometimes I give my chair, sometimes I'm just in the meeting, and I usually share when I'm there. It took a little while to become comfortable to do that in the groups, but I guess my nature overall. But fairly early on, I was able to share more and more, and now it's pretty natural.
And do you have a sponsor?
Yes, I do.
And how long have you had this particular sponsor?
Now for about 6 years.
In addition to the recovery program, what other methods are you using to manage stress triggers that could threaten your sobriety?
Yes, well, I play sports. I love playing soccer. So I play once a week soccer at least. I run in a way to keep in shape to do that. I have a very supportive family. I was married in 2012, and she's extremely supportive. Doing the math, there were 2 years where I was drinking when we were together, and she just wanted that to stop, basically. And so did people who could be affected when I was behaving irresponsibly. And so I have a very strong network in place, and the primary one really is AA, in all honesty, which I wouldn't have, thought more than 6 years ago, but it is.
Now, did you stop drinking for yourself, or did you stop drinking for others?
Well, for both. I mean, certainly for myself, because really, right now, I have a life that's so much better than I had when I was drinking, so why would I want to, go back to that? So you're asking at the time, what was my decision? Certainly factors converge to make it a lot more necessary to make a decision of that kind. I was alluding to this professor of mine who is at Palo Alto University, where I got my degree. I had a really good conversation with him, and he had worked in substance abuse quite extensively as well, and after I lost my internship, I lost it before I even started because of the 2 DUI convictions, and that was tough, and I lost a year in that process, but at the same time I didn't entirely lose it because I did other things. But so when that happened, I had a discussion with him, and he had actually been a supervisor of mine before in practicum at Gronowski, but at any rate, I talked with him, and he said, well, I'm glad that you didn't lie on your application, which I would not do, and, but because, well, anyway, there was an application for KPIC, which doesn't initially ask if you've ever been convicted of any crimes, which particularly at the time, still drinking, I sort of thought, well, rather than applying to APIC, let me just skirt around that and try to start it in an internship. But then when you go to work at specific sites, particularly if it's a hospital setting, they do ask those kinds of questions, understandably, and so then I didn't have the internship. So it became pretty clear that if I wanted a career in psychology, there was no more drinking, and I had to do something to make that happen.
After your probation ends, do you plan on continuing with your support recovery program?
I certainly do. It's a big part of my life.
And after your DUI convictions, did you participate in any psychotherapy?
Yes, I did. For three years, I had 2 therapists, and one I had when I was going to her in Palo Alto, and then I got my internship at Access Institute, and so I needed to move to be closer, and so terminated with her, and then continued the next month with another therapist who passed away, as you guys have seen. And yeah, so there have been different things I've had to deal with in sobriety. I can go into some of those if you guys want as well, but I have a way to handle them, and I just have more peace in my life for what happens.
Do you feel that the psychotherapy helped you to provide insight into your drinking problem?
I think it certainly did. The triggers for drinking, as I said, for me, what people think of me being judged, those kinds of ideas, even if they're not even thinking that, we know psychologically, we can sort of have those thoughts. But it's really been a gift to be able to take a step back and what people share in meetings and stuff. I think you hear it enough times, and you also contribute your own experience, work with people. I think it's just changing the way that we think. That's what the profession is. That's what I try to do with my clients, and that's what I had to do myself as well.
So do you feel that the therapy that you undertook helped you to gain some coping tools to deal with the stressors that you had mentioned?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of that's AA. A lot of it is, I can just say in AA, which you can do whether or not you're in AA, but it's looking at myself, doing an inventory, looking at what I resent, what I fear, all those kinds of things. And it's a good practice to have. And I guess I maybe had to learn to do that more this way.
What would you do in the future if you felt that you had a weak moment and you were tempted to drink? How would you handle that?
Yeah, well, thankfully, over the course of a fair amount of time, it doesn't really come up with sort of an acuteness right now, but thoughts can come up. It's possible. I have a sponsor who I can always reach out to. I can always go to a meeting. I have my wife. But the program is really what I turn to.
And I understood you completed a ethics course. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
What did you feel that you learned from that program, from that course?
Yeah, the name of it is Ethics Are Not Rules. I'm sort of aware of the irony of that title, but I arranged it with my probation monitor at the time. It was nearby, frankly, in a place where I also went with my wife to have a weekend there, and went to the course. And ethics are not rules. It's sort of, but to me, I know what is right, and at the time, what I was doing was not right. To be working, I never worked with a patient when I drank and come in. I want to say that. It was on the weekends, as I say, and so that's, I guess, something in me that, and just the scope of my drinking, as I described, wasn't such that that would happen. So essentially, there was a review of different ethical guidelines as well, and just heard about multiple relationships, and they're, I've been studying all that for the EPPP as well, and so, the thing is, for me, is being honest right now. And so if I'm honest and if I know what the code is, then I'm not going to really run into problems.
Now, have you stayed current in the field of psychology?
Yes.
What can you tell us what journals you're reading?
Yes, I have substance abuse journal that I have received, and I read in the field. I was reading a book as well on transforming relationships, is what it's called, and has to do with control mastery therapy. And I continually look at research, and I stay involved doing that.
Have you attended any conventions lately that are related to psychology?
Well, I went to the convention where I went to the ethics are not rules. I went to the APA convention, presented a poster there. That was a little while ago now. That was before my probation.
And what are your career plans if the petition is granted?
Yeah, that's really why I'm here today. And some people might wonder, and this is part of, I would say that some of the reasons to hopefully grant this is that I've served nearly 2.5 of the 3 years of the probation. And people might ask, well, why are you even asking for the 6 months to be reduced? And I need to start my life at this point, and it has been given the opportunity to do that by the board and move forward on this probationary basis. But without getting into too many specifics, like at Kaiser, they're looking for somebody who's in recovery, has their PhD, knows Spanish, and is male. And there are these different opportunities, but I can't do them. And it's, from what I understand, I would, I think, be working there now, but again, I go back to what I did to get in this position. And so, but I do want to, I'm not getting paid at Salvation Army. Thankfully, my wife works and, but it's, I think people can understand how that would be difficult. And I just, the other part which I mentioned is that my supervisor is getting quite close to retiring. This may or may not be relevant to you guys. It's relevant to me, and so I'll say, but she is getting to the end of her career at Salvation Army, and so kind of in this fall period, and so if I'd have to figure out another arrangement for like 6 more months, which would not be the easiest thing to do. And again, it's not strictly speaking the point here either. Like if I were not doing a solid program of recovery, if I were not engaged in doing this, I don't think that, that the thrust of what is going on is what I've been doing. This is something practical which will very much affect my life. I could arrange something else, but it would be really a challenge, and I would just have to do that. But so, yeah, I'm just looking to move forward in my life and not forgetting what has happened in the past. And I don't, because I'm always reminded of it at meetings and outside of them and everything.
So last question, what assurances can you give the board that, you will maintain your sobriety and you won't have those lapses in judgment again?
Yeah, well, I haven't had any for more than 6 years, and it's because I have an active program of recovery, and that's something I'm going to continue because I actually like it at this point too. And I'm so involved in it, I could retreat from it, but I wouldn't want to, and I enjoy doing it. And I think my sponsees wouldn't be too happy if I did either, and I just like being engaged in the program. So.
No further questions.
You mentioned KPIC?
Right.
Is that an acronym for something?
Yeah, California Association of Internships.
California Association of Psychological Interns or something like that?
Yeah, that's...
Thank you. All right, we'll see if the board has questions. I'll start at this end. Dr. Horn?
No questions.
Ms. Jones?
No questions.
Dr. Phillips?
Just a couple of quick questions for you, Dr. Barr. Could you give me you said you're an alcoholic, is that correct?
Yes.
Can you give me a functional definition of what you think an alcoholic is?
What I would say is something in the Book of AA, and there are a lot of clinical definitions as well. And now, vis-a-vis dependence versus abuse, now it's all substance use disorder. But what I'll say is that for me, if I can't control and enjoy my drinking, then I'm not alcoholic. It's a way that it's laid out in our book of AA, and it felt like at times I was enjoying it. I thought that I was dealing with problems in my life, but I was not doing that at all, and it was out of control. And when I tried to control it, I wasn't enjoying it, and I'm an alcoholic.
And you are a binge-style alcoholic?
That's right.
A periodic?
Yeah.
Okay. I noticed that there was a mention in the stipulation that you entered into relative to your probationary status that there was a mention of specimen samples, and this is not an accusation. I'm just curious, was there ever a period of time when any specimen samples were taken from you during your probation?
I actually submitted one today, which was interesting as I was thinking of coming over here. But it's, it's, I'll just say as I was going to say that sort of earlier, but I thought, whatever. It's just part of it, I think, acceptance. It's just, the process isn't easy. I put myself here, for 2.5 years. It was 4 times a month, then now it's 3. But you got to plan your day around that. That's the top priority on the list, and it's not an issue to test, but the time is.
And have there ever been times when you've tested positive for any substance that was non-prescribed? Okay. And from what I'm understanding, right now you're in a position where you're not able to make a living as a result of this situation?
Yeah.
And it's your hope to start to contribute to your household?
For sure. Have a family, just build things in life. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Erickson?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, Dr. Barr. I was thinking about the reasons a person might petition to have early termination, and many times I suppose it's to get out of the misery of all the things that might go with being on probation, whether it's fluid testing or admitting to peers or potential employers. Just a few minutes ago, it occurred to me there could be a second reason, and that is if someone petitions early and is granted early termination, that is an affirmation of success in doing a good job with rehabilitation that one presumably doesn't get if they finish their probation and just that's it. So there may be some positive. Have you thought about that at all in terms of trying to get off early?
Certainly, it's crossed my mind in that sense, and there's a few things about it. It's not not having to do the fluid testing will be great if that's what happens, but more than anything, I just want to be able to work and, contribute and everything. But this was something I was going to address as well, and there's something in the original statement which says... One second, it's a lot of papers here, but, all I'm referring to here is it says completion of full term of probation. This is in the stipulated settlement. It's on the 9th page, number 17. Yes, certainly.
I believe it's AGO 031.
The books that we received are not stamped.
So this would be in the first segment,
I have my own materials.
AG 0013?
031.
031. So that would be decision in order?
It's in the decision in order. What page, number 17, the decision in order?
The page number is 9,
Page 9 of the
and 17 is the sort of the number of the. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. It says upon successful completion of probation, applicant's registration and license shall be fully restored, which was a ray of hope I was holding on to for, some time. And And so, basically, and doing it early, I think it is an affirmation. I hope that it is. All I really, one of the things I really wanted was just to be able to speak in front of the board during the process. I suppose if I contested it initially, I could have done that, but it made more sense for everybody to go through the channel of just agreeing and showing what I was doing and would continue to. And so, but I'm happy to be here, and I want to say, and again, I don't know about the relevancy or appropriateness of this, but you actually asked me, and I was going to bring it up anyway. But I would just hope that after the process, because when I first applied for the registration, it was a year after that I was even able to start working for free. And then, so it's been, 3.5 years that, and so basically it's not easy, but it's the reality, and it's where I've put myself. So I really just say myself, and I'm not going to assume anything from today how things will go, but I just hope that perhaps licensure could be cleared somewhat going forward. That's just my hope.
Thank you. I have one other question, completely different type of question. I suppose it's theoretically possible that anyone could fall off the wagon. And I know that Ms. Evans asked if you've had the weak moments or the urges, and I think you basically said, well, not in any serious way. What should a person do if they fall off the wagon and they've been in a committed recovery program? What do you think you would do? And not necessarily a DUI type situation, but to make up, maybe drinking a six-pack at home or something, and realizing that you've fallen off, or that one has fallen off. What are the kinds of things that you would recommend as a sponsor, or do you think would be advised to you as a sponsee? What's the smart thing to do as a psychologist if that were to happen?
Come back in, for sure, but to the rooms of AA. But I got too much at stake, and that doesn't, mean that people haven't gone out or fallen off, even with a lot at stake. But I don't know. I mean, since I had that meeting with my professor, I haven't had a drink since, and I'm going to do everything to make sure that I don't. It's a day at a time, and but.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. No more.
Ms. Akwebadu?
Yes, I noticed you said you'd lost a year. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. When I originally wrote my application for the psychological assistantship registration, I wrote a narrative statement, and I'm just describing it kind of now as well, somewhat abbreviated. Just so you apply to internships, and I didn't fully explain the acronym of CAPIC, but essentially it's the California Internship Body. And so I had an internship with San Mateo Medical Center, but when they found out about my DUI convictions, which is to say I told them about them when it was asked on a job application, preliminary information that you give when you're going to work there, as opposed to what you fill out for the CAPIC application, which asks nothing about any convictions of any kind. And as I said, that was part of the basis of applying to CAPIC, frankly, because I was very afraid of these things that I'd done and how it would affect my life. And so what happened was, okay, I was all set up for internship, and that's what made it a real blow as well, because I had this internship. It was all agreed upon. We had signed on as a binding agreement. And, you know, but they reserve the right, understandably, if I have drank in an unsafe manner, as was demonstrated by my DUIs, to decline my ability to participate in their internship program. And I didn't have a program of recovery. I didn't have sober time at that time. So I couldn't tell them that was the case because it wasn't the case.
So you had not shared with them about the DUI?
Exactly. It was never asked.
So they were never asked and you never...
I didn't just
you didn't
volunteer it. Yeah.
Wait, I have two other questions. If there were no AA program around, and I noticed you had said that you would turn to, if there were challenging times, you would turn to the program. I'm saying if there were no AA program around, what would you do?
Well,
Let's
it's
say
an,
there was no
it's an interesting
sponsor.
question. There are a lot of different recovery programs. This is the one I've found that's worked, and it does exist since 39 or 35. And
Let's say you were in a place where
I mean,
it just wasn't.
what you're asking is an interesting question, and I think, you know, you get into the idea of willpower, and that's kind of not exactly how we look at it, although I do feel I have morals and willpower, and I employ those as well as the principles of the program, as well as helping others, as well as a contact with my higher power. I understand what you're asking. It's certainly quite hypothetical, and what I would say is that I would find a way to stay sober. That's what I believe, but it's not really sort of the nature of alcoholism, as many of us understand it as well. That so I could go to continual therapy, and I have and I went to therapy for quite some time. I could, as I do other activities and coping skills, but for me, the nature of alcoholism is a little deeper than that, and it needs a daily program. So that's what I do, and I'm glad it's there, and that has been for some time.
Okay, I have two more questions. It says, you said that you never worked with a patient while you were under the influence. What helped you to not do that?
Well, I wasn't drinking during the day. I wasn't drinking at a time when I would go see a patient. And we talked about morals and we talked about ways. I mean, I think there was something put in me that I can't imagine really doing that.
Last question, you mentioned about your supportive network. Could you describe that to us, please? What does your supportive network look like?
Yeah. So I would say that it starts with my wife. She's a wonderful person, and I have my family. My father passed away 12 years ago, as I put it in materials. And so, I think that did contribute to my drinking some over the course of time. But I have my mother and my aunt and my sister. We're a pretty small family at this point, but we're close together. And I have now a new family, extended family with my in-laws, and I have AA, and I have friends outside of there, but that's AA is a big thing for me.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones?
Dr. Barr, I just wanted to follow up. I think earlier when you were speaking, you said you go to 3 or 4 AA meetings. And you were just mentioning about it being a daily practice. Are those 3 or is it 4 meetings? Do you go on a regular basis? Or you mentioned one as your home. So do you just go to one typically and then you go to others as necessary? Or are you involved on the regular basis with 3 or is it 4? I'm not sure.
Well, I may go to 3, I may go to 4, I may go to more during the week, but typically it's 3 or 4. And My home group is a Wednesday meeting at 6 o'clock. I also, as I'm not being paid, was able to work out some hours where I have a noon meeting on Friday. I was the secretary of that a little while back, and I go there and really enjoy that meeting. And then there's another meeting on Monday nights that I go to on the way home from work. So there are really three that I pretty much go to every week. And there's another, there's, a lot of meetings, but.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board members? Ms. Evans, any further questions?
No further questions, but I would like to introduce into evidence a extra binder, the witness binder that is Bates stamped. No further questions for the petitioner, but I want to introduce into evidence a Bates stamped set of documents.
Okay,
Evidence.
I can substitute that one for the one that I have.
That would be great.
All right, we'll substitute this Bates stamped volume as exhibit number 1. Dr. Barr, anything you'd like to say in closing to the board that you haven't already covered?
Well, I was going to sort of address one of the questions that was asked, and I'll just wrap things up as well. It's been nearly 10 years since the one DUI conviction and about 7.5 since the other. I've been sober for more than 6 years. I continue to be involved in this program of recovery, and I enjoy doing so. And it's had a big effect on my life, so I'm not going to stop doing it. And I hope that, and I don't think you guys can say anything to this either, but as I say, it took a year to get started with this, and that's because of the facts of the case. But now that we've kind of made a disposition of those in a really formal kind of a sense, I hope I can move forward towards licensure and give back, work in the profession, contribute.
Okay, thank you. This matter is now submitted and the record is closed. As I said, you're free to go. The board's going to go to executive session to decide your case on the previous one, and you'll be notified by mail of the board's decision. And before you leave, I need to give you a form. This is just in case you ever need to request a transcript of the proceedings. This will give you the information you need.
33 pages.
So the proceedings will now be going into closed session. We'll be meeting in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 1126C3 to discuss disciplinary matters, including the 2 petitions we just heard, petitions for reconsideration, stipulations, and other proposed decisions. This will be a continuation of the discussion we had before we broke for lunch. Thank you. We will be returning to open session, but only to recess, so probably not exciting to come back for that.
Are we on break now or in closed session?
Do you want a break?